intuition and meditative states are not thought-based, they're not synaptic, and sometimes they're even precognitive, right? Because they arise as this sense of knowing, not as thoughts, but as the antenna of the CSF, the seawater. Like your cerebrospinal fluid is only one molecule different from seawater. It is basically, these three rivers of ocean in your spine, and it transmits this energy instantaneously through the nervous system. I think the CSF is absolutely fascinating, especially when you start getting into the rhythms of the sacred secretion and how to really cultivate the chrism oil and how to raise that so that the metabolites are upgraded and transformed, the tryptophan to melatonin to dimethyltryptamine and these vasopressin and oxytocin and these other hormones of enlightenment that basically get released into your system.
Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today, Paul welcomes back the guest from his most shared episode of 2023, water expert Isabel Friend. A big thank you to our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, and Organifi. Their support is essential in producing this podcast, and we hope you will show your support by visiting them online and trying all the amazing products that they produce. Please check the show notes at chekinstitute.com/podcast for links and details. And now over to Paul and Isabel as they talk about water from a spiritual perspective.
Well, everybody, I'm excited to have Isabel Friend back, one of my favorite water experts in the whole world. And her previous podcast turned out to be the most shared podcast in 2023. So congratulations, Isabel.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And congratulations to you. That's quite a surprise, a beautiful surprise.
I was really
had
surprised.
So many amazing podcasts last year.
Well, the thing is, it really shows me that people are very interested in water. I think that's really exciting and necessary. And we covered, kind of a lot of the basics of water in our first podcast, but we didn't get to the stuff that's the most fun for you and I, which is the spiritual aspects of water. So today we're going to get into the spiritual aspects. So our title today is Water, a Spiritual Perspective. So Isabel, to begin with, can you share an overview of your personal spiritual philosophy and what your spiritual development practices are and how they relate to your relationship and work with water? Because I think it's very important for the guests to understand, your philosophical spiritual disposition as a person and how that relates to your relationship with water. Because I think, you get a lot of podcasts where people are talking about a lot of things, but you never really know what led the person to be shaped that way or to see the world that way, or in this case, water.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Diving just straight into the deep end. Into the,
let's do it.
Question. And I love it as well because this is something that I don't really share about very often. I feel like typically the Western mind is much more prone to approach things from the left brain. And so I definitely tend to share more on the scientific side of things. But like you said, this juicy, spiritual, deep dive into water as consciousness and water as the very body of life itself. Like that's where my real fascination is. And I know it is with yours too when it comes to water. So, my spiritual path in general really started when I dropped out of college at 16 and moved to an ashram and wanted to take my vows of sannyas. I wanted to become a monk. I was completely devoted to God. I was just head over heels. I was a bhakti yogini. I thought nothing in the entire world of the temporal matters except for the infinite. So I'm just going to become a swami. And thank God, being 16 at the time, the swamis there suggested that I live a bit more life first and experience the world a bit more before I decided to renounce the world. So
test the waters.
Yeah, I'm grateful that they said that in the end. I think an entire life of celibacy in a monastery would have been challenging.
It would have been a real sad thing if you were celibate. There'd be a lot of really sad men out there.
Well, you can always make love with God, I guess. That's always an option.
Well, I hope we're doing that anyhow. I mean, everybody we love and everything we love is God. So it's an easy thing when you understand that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the essence of it. Well, since then, I took their advice and kind of went my own way and ended up getting involved in a lot of different spiritual practices over the years since then. Very involved in the Red Road and different medicine paths. But all of these different practices, they've always led me back to water in different ways. And I've had the honor of doing water ceremonies with a number of indigenous wisdom keepers around the world. And I got to live in Indonesia for over a year to study with the water priests in Bali, and they practice a religion there called Agama Tirtha, which is the holy water religion. So, they've been stewarding these profoundly beautiful water wisdom practices for just centuries and centuries and generation upon generation, building on these understandings and this communion, this reciprocity with water. In fact, I would hear stories at the time of, a few generations ago, it was really common for their priests there to even walk on water and to traverse different dimensions through springs, which I've had personal experience with a couple of times. And, I learned a lot from them about holy water. And I think one of the biggest things that I picked up from that experience in particular, among many, is just the fact that, water's capacity to enact miracles is actually directly proportionate to how much reverence she receives. So water is the primordial mirror, right? In other words, if you treat water like a common mundane commodity, then it's going to show up for you in that way. But if you respect water deeply, you profoundly respect and revere the source of life and its connection to divinity, and you treat water like the miracle worker that she is, then she takes on these miraculous properties, and suddenly these incredible healings start to take place. And as I said, even traversing dimensions through water, which it's in countless indigenous tales that you can traverse between this world and other worlds. It springs, and we're all familiar with the mists of Avalon and that story of being able to traverse through the mists, and that's pretty prevalent in many legends as well. That mist and springs hold these portals, these doorways. And then, yeah, speaking of the indigenous wisdom, there's so much beautiful water wisdom that I resonate with that has really informed my spiritual path. And probably one of the biggest is the Kogi tribe in Colombia. So they really recognize water as the origin of all reality. So for them,
Mm.
they see that the whole structure of the world is holographically sustained by water, that every river, every runoff, every raindrop maintains existence itself, physically and metaphysically. That within water is the metaphysical blueprint of the universe, that it basically holds the map of reality, and not just the physical reality, but all worlds of reality, from dreams to the structures of daily life to memories of the past and probability fields of future timelines and psychic visions and the visions we receive in medicine journeys. All of these things they recognize as being maintained and accessed by water and really mapped by the structure of water. It's like they see each and every drop as a hologram of the whole universe, and through each drop you can access any point in the universe, and that the holographic nature of the universe itself, the reason why the universe is holographic in nature, is itself a function of water, and the fact that water is everywhere in the universe, as we talked about on the last podcast, and the fact that there's not just physical water, which we think of as water. That's just water's body. But like we have a body, mind, and spirit, water has a body, mind, and spirit. And we typically, when we talk about water, we're talking about solid, liquid, and gas. But of course, the non-physical aspect of water, the etheric field, is omnipresent and pervasive all throughout the universe, which is part of this key to water's holographic nature. So, it's really prevalent in a lot of these teachings to hear again and again that water is life, of course, but that water is actually the vessel of consciousness. And wherever you find consciousness, you find water, whether it's physical or non-physical. In fact, the Kogi word for water is the same as their word for spirit, aluna. The same as what they describe as spirit is basically the way we would describe the ether, this sort of omnipresent ocean of energy and consciousness. And they say that you can't really separate them, that all creation, they say, is born out of water's thoughts. Everything we think of as reality is water thinking. And the more I've studied hydrogen over the years, and this is where, for me, spirituality always leads me back to science, and science always leads me back to spirituality. And they're just, through water, they really start to speak the same language. In my studies of hydrogen, I found that I truly believe that hydrogen may be the Holy Spirit spoken of in the scriptures, and that it certainly is the spirit of water. And, that the mind of water is like the etheric field with which water is always in constant communion and communication in direct proportion to its structure and its vitality, and that its spirit is hydrogen, which is the fuel of life and the locus of energy generation and evolution and movement all throughout the universe. I know I'm getting a bit on a rabbit trail here, but recently, in the past few years, my spiritual path has definitely taken me much deeper into biblical studies than I ever expected. So, I've been resonating so deeply with the original Christian teachings, because Christianity, at its heart, is a water religion. So, water was named over it was named 722 times in the Bible. Water is named more than hope, more than faith, more than love, more than prayer, more than worship. And Christianity has a reputation for being a religion that's based on all of those things, right? Faith and prayer. But a few people realize that, first and foremost, Christianity is a water religion. And that from the beginning of the universe, when it says God moved over the face of the waters, to the moment when God created the earth by separating the waters, to the moment that he sent his son, Christ, who was called the fountain of living waters, to all of the countless water-based ceremonies and rituals practiced within the church, like water blessings and anointings and baptisms, all of the water miracles in the Bible, and the very last words of Revelation. Like, water is among the first words of Genesis and the last words of Revelation. So there are some Christian scholars like Chet Myers, for example, who have basically mapped out the Bible as basically being a call to water discipleship more than almost anything else. If something is mentioned in scripture even more than prayer, maybe it's an even more vital aspect of spiritual life. And we know that water directly connects us to the source, to our personal relationship and reciprocity with divinity comes through the fact that we are temples. We are biowater temples. We're 99.95% water molecules, these bodies that we're in. And this is holy water that we're driving around. And yet all of these references to water in the Bible, they're ignored, or they're written off as metaphorical, like when Christ is referred to as the living waters, or when he says, I'll open springs of living water on the inside of you and you'll never thirst again. Or when God's voice is described 3 different times in the Bible, 3 separate times, it says God's voice is the sound of many waters. That's usually just considered metaphorical. But the more you understand the science of living water, then, water does, in fact, contain the blueprint of the kingdom of heaven and is our access point to that, and as Moses Hackman said, water is the glove on the hand of consciousness. It's the way in which God's will is enacted in 3D form through the resonance, the energy, the vibration, the geometry, the memory of water, and its ability to communicate transdimensionally through black hole hydrogen at its very center, right? So then I really believe that all of those Bible verses can be interpreted actually very literally, and that it is also a map of the journey of the biowaters within our own bodies, because there's a very unique alchemy of our internal waters that happens specifically with the waters of the cerebrospinal fluid, where you can cultivate what's called the chrism oil, or the sacred secretion, or the Christ oil, which is basically just upgraded metabolites of regular cerebrospinal fluid. Like melatonin gets upgraded to DMT, and there are other, metabolites of enlightenment, as they're called, that are produced endogenously when you cultivate the inner waters in a particular way. And that the Bible actually maps this out, and it's all an allegorical, symbolical teaching of the journey of the inner waters. So that alchemy has become a big part of my spiritual practice, and just really in training my brain waves and my heart waves to more consistent states of coherence, because that's what creates more coherent biowater. So, a lot of meditation for that, and singing and praying to water is also a really big part of my practice. I've been collecting water medicine songs from around the world along all of my travels. So I love singing to the waters. Yeah, the last thing I'll share about this is that a big part of my spiritual connection has also been finding ways to give back to water. And I think this is so important because, water teaches us generosity. Water teaches us abundance. Water teaches us reciprocity and flow and selflessness. And she gives us life, right? She gives us everything. And in most indigenous traditions, there's a concept of, it goes by different names, ofrendas or pagamentos or chanangsari or whatever it's called. It's really cross cultural. And, we need to make offerings to water. We need to serve her. It's practical, but it's also spiritual. It's like the rent that we pay for walking around in bodies of water that we've borrowed from our watershed for one lifetime. And that could look like guardianship. It could look like activism. It could look like being a water protector, being in service to the waters, or even just giving literal offerings like songs and flower petals or cleaning up trash by a local body of water. But I really think that cultivating that personal relationship with water has got to be the cornerstone of any water path, any spiritual water path, that it's not about intellectualizing or just doing the water alchemy practices to make your water more hydrating, but making sure that living water is accessible to your entire watershed, to your entire ecosystem, to your entire community, and really being of service in that way. Because again, that's what water teaches us. Water teaches us how to be of service and how to be selfless in the way that she is.
Yeah, very interesting. Water is like God and a mirror, neither of which ever says no.
Oh, I love that.
You
Yeah.
can you can put negative energies into water, you can put poisons into it, or you can put love and beauty and you know attention, awareness, and nurture into it, and it will accept all of it without any resistance. And then your description of the drops of water being resonant with the holographic universal concept really are very in line with the myth of Indra's net. Are you familiar with Indra's net?
Yeah,
Yeah, so each of the jewels in Indra's net could easily be a drop of water.
exactly.
And then I find it interesting that you're studying Christianity because I have plenty of thoughts on Christianity. One of the challenges with Christianity, I recently researched this for a chapter I'm writing in Spirit Gym. There's 45,000 branches of
Oh
Christianity,
my goodness.
each claiming to have the original teachings of Jesus.
Of course.
So it's a very, very confused religion.
It's gotten very
There's
convoluted.
Yes, and Christianity is also thought to be a star religion. I studied the works of the teachings of Jordan Maxwell. He had a whole series on Gaia, and he actually mentioned a very specific Bible, which is very descriptive of Christianity as a star religion. And I bought it. It was an expensive one, it's a big one, but it has a ton of footnotes, and it really shows that the Christian religion is a star religion based on the movement of the stars and the influence of the stars, which of course is also influencing water directly. You couldn't have the water not be responding to stars, it would be impossible.
Absolutely. Astrotheological readings of Christianity are so profound and so incredible. And I think this is one of the reasons why Christianity has come to fascinate me so much, is because there are so many different ways that you can look at this multifaceted jewel of a book that on its surface confuses most people. And I think that's why there are so many different sects and so many different interpretations. But, it can be read astrotheologically. It can be read as a map of the body and the journey of the chrism oil as it goes up the 33 vertebrae of the spine and how it gets transmuted and resurrected. And it's very anatomical in some ways. You can read it as Ched Myers has as a really a roadmap to water guardianship and water activism. You could read it as a roadmap to becoming sovereign and extracting from the matrix of Roman rule, which still rules the planet. You can read it as, a way of really stepping into the private jurisdiction and reclaiming our equitable rights under God, as opposed to, the rights that are given to us by laws and by pieces of paper, and so all of these different facets are equally true all at the same time. And I think that's what makes it a living book. The it's often said that the Bible is alive, and it's the only book that requires the author to be present while you're reading it, because it is so kind of holographic in nature that when you look at it from one perspective, you dive into this rabbit trail of truth, and you can look at it from a completely different perspective, and it'll say something that is still just as true. Whereas if you just look at it from the surface, it's confusing as hell.
Yeah, and I think Greg Braden has developed a code or worked with others. I'm not sure how many people were involved, but there's a code that they can decode scriptures. But I think he speaks of having decoded the Bible through this.
Gematria? Where they decode it with the numbers?
Yeah, I don't think it's gematria. I think it's another special code. And it's been a while since I watched his TV shows where he talks about how the code is developed. But the point is just lending itself to the fact that, like water, the Bible seems to be like a mirror. I think all scriptures are. In fact, I think everything in the whole physical universe is. Really, perception is more real to us than anything else. So if you look at the Bible through the eyes of a Mormon or a Catholic or a Protestant, etc., you're seeing something that mirrors you back to you. And I think that's why there's 45,000 derivations. I do think that all, not just the Bible, but all religious scriptures, because they require such a depth of understanding of history. Menley P. Hall has an excellent book on decoding the Bible,
Oh, I
which I
love it.
studied. Yeah, his decoding of the Bible is quite shocking, because it shows you how dangerously misinterpreted the Bible is and how much history you have to have of the historical roots of Christianity and the making of the Bible, and who is involved, and what their tribal relationships were, and how they formed these ideas, and what the meaning of the words were at different periods. For example, I studied the word soul, and at the time the Bible was written, the word soul meant the same thing as we use the word mind for today. So when people are reading the Bible, they're oftentimes unaware that the words they're reading don't mean the same things as we think they mean today. So you can get led off on a very long rabbit trail. And something I've shared before, but I don't think it could be shared enough, is, are you familiar with the Hindu philosopher sage Shankara?
Shankara? No, I don't think so.
Shankara was a very unique human being. There's a great book of his teachings called The Crest Jewel of Discrimination. And Shankara, at 8 years of age, began traveling all over India on foot, seeking out the greatest spiritual gurus and masters and challenging them to debates. And he never lost a single debate. He died quite young. I think he died at 32. I can't remember what caused his death. But Shankara said something quite profound. He said, "No man can understand scripture until he is enlightened. And when he is enlightened, he does not need scripture." And why that's such a profound statement is because we have very, very few enlightened people reading scripture, especially in Sunday school. So people get programmed with beliefs about the Bible, and it leads to a lot of trouble. But Houston Smith, you know who Houston Smith was?
No.
Houston Smith was considered the foremost expert on world religions of the recent times. He died at about 101 years of age. He wrote many excellent books. I've studied all of his books, and I've studied his course on world religion, which is phenomenal. He's the only person in the world that devoted 5 years of his life to living in the region and practicing the major world religions as though he was totally committed to each of those religions. So he 5 years and went and lived with the people and practiced the religion and really embodied it. And he was a professor of world religion. Houston Smith says there's 4 levels of scriptural interpretation, which I think it's important for everybody to hear. I have shared them before, but again, some of these things have to be repeated so they sink in. He says the lowest level of scriptural interpretation is literal. So reading anything word for word because of all the reasons I just mentioned. Second is ethnocentric, which means my group against your group. So whenever you're reading scriptures, if you have an orientation to perceiving the words you're reading only from the perspective of your group, that's what leads to wars against other groups that perceive scripture differently. And religious wars are probably close to the most common cause of war. The third highest level is allegorical, to see these scriptures as teaching stories and to look into them to see what is actually being conveyed in the story as a deeper meaning. And interestingly, the highest level of scriptural interpretation is inspirational. He says the most enlightened teachers always use scripture to inspire people to live and love more fully, to learn and to grow. And I think, if we look at water from that perspective, we can see that there's a lot of scientists that tell you water is nothing but hydrogen and oxygen, it's nothing else, and all the rest of this stuff is just fluffy bullshit. If they're ethnocentric, then they're looking at it from the perspective of their very own group, whatever that can be. And we have a lot of scientific materialism, and we have very evolved scientists, and we have people like looking at cerebrospinal fluid and all the different humors of the body and giving us scientific descriptions of water and looking at the holographic nature of water. So right in the scientists, their own ethnocentric orientation is mirroring itself in their interpretations of water. And then we have people like you that can see the story, and which we're going to get into next, the myths of water and what are they really pointing to, which is also allegorical. But then we have people like you that are inspiring us all to love the water and respect it. So those are the thoughts that came to my mind. I just personally, whenever I hear people orienting things toward the Bible, I get nervous because as a therapist of 40 years, I have tracked most people's serious health problems and life challenges back to programming from religion, mostly Christian, because I'm in the United States. And I've spent countless hours sitting down with people with Bibles and scriptural books and mostly showing them what the mystics had to say about the same passages so they could see it from a much more enlightened perspective, and helping people realize that, you're at danger of misunderstanding scriptural interpretation if you don't have enough depth to know what you're reading. And it's like anything else. If you don't know what you're reading and you're trying to repair your car, you can ruin it. If you're,
Especially if the manual that you're reading while you're trying to repair your car has been translated and retranslated several different times, and then parts of it have been completely cut out of the repair manual. Like it's not going to work. Of
yes,
course, if you're reading the Bible in the original Aramaic, the meanings are completely different. And I think religiosity has bastardized the original teachings to a horrific extent, to where, as you said, it's enormously harmful to people in a lot of ways. But I think if you can get to that personal connection of the relationship, and that can be found in any religion, and every scripture points towards it, is what is your relationship to the divine? What is that personal point of connection? And I think that the more we optimize our biowater, the more we have access to that infinite field of energy, that source energy. Dr. Zach Bush said, you cannot have a spiritual experience if you're dehydrated. You can't have a spiritual awareness of your own identity.
you might have an experience of dying.
Right?
That could be spiritual for the last time for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
It's that holy water that really taps us in that way, and allows us that communion.
Have you ever heard of the book called Prayers of the Cosmos? I believe it's by Neil Donald Klotz.
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, you got to get that. You can get it, a CD of it. I've got it in my library. I've read it several times over because it's amazing. He basically, I think it was the Beatitudes of Jesus, but he studied Aramaic for 14 years. And then he went to the oldest known Bible, which is written in Aramaic, which is the original language of Jesus, and he showed you verse by verse what the words meant in Aramaic, but then what the Catholic Church translated it as, and showed you that it's very deceiving, and that
Completely different.
the verses they chose and the way they translated them are very good for controlling people's minds, but are potentially not at all what Jesus was saying. So it's either, I could look it up on the internet, but I don't want to screw anything up on our web system here.
Oh, I can
But
share.
Prayers of the
I've read about
Cosmos,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, there's at one point in my water prayers, I learned the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic. I'll see if I can remember it. Abun de Baushmaya net kadash shmach te malkutach nechwe tavayanach aikana de Baushmaya ba'ara haulan lachma de sunkanan yamana. I think there's like two more lines after that. I don't remember, but as you said, it's completely different. Like understanding the original, and there really is no way to translate it into English because it's a holographic language. There are so many layers of meaning to each of the words, but even just understanding the cultural context of it, like Abun de Baal Shemaya is typically translated as "Our Father who art in heaven." But Abba at the time was used as a term of endearment that you wouldn't just say to your father, but a mother could say to her son, or you could say to your brother or your friend. Like Abba was just like a term of loving endearment. It just meant like my beloved in a way, and culturally at the time. So it wasn't just father; it's our beloved. It's like a sweetness. It's a closeness when you call out to God in that way. And then the Baal Shemaya, who art in heaven, but that doesn't mean heaven that's like above or far away. The actual translation of that is everywhere. It means like universal. It means like omnipresent, kind of. So instead of our Father who art in heaven, you have our beloved who is everywhere. And just that one line alone shifts everything so much. And then line by line, yeah, each one is just a completely different meaning. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to learn it, to really resonate with it, because just the without even knowing what it means, that's Aramaic is one of those languages that just the vibration of it alone carries so much information that my conscious mind doesn't need to know or understand, but my bio water recognizes and can vibrate in tune with that.
Well, you'll like the fact that he has a CD where I think he recites the Beatitudes in Aramaic, because he says the same thing. The sounds of the words pronounced properly have a profound effect on you. And if I remember right, Aramaic only has 14 letters in their alphabet, and we've got 26. So part of what he shows you in the translation is because of the less letters in the alphabet, each word can have many more meanings than typically are assigned to English words. So it really takes probably somebody that speaks Aramaic to understand the inflections of the voice and the changes in tones. Like Eskimos have something like 40 words for snow. But unless you're an Eskimo, they might say the same word, but slightly differently. And you might just think they have an accent. So that's why in the book, he shows you the many different things any one sutra or sentence could mean. And when you look at them, if you said, well, what would I interpret that as if it was as Jesus talking, well, you could easily find the ones that brought you into a sense of wholeness or a sense of more loving. And it's always been sad for me that people keep referring to God as a he, because that's a patriarchal silliness. We wouldn't call water he. And so if you go back to the matriarchal period, then you have much more of a feminine expression of the divine. And since the divine is the source that gives birth to everything, to think of God as a man is another level of programming that comes right with the whole patriarchal craziness that we need to heal fast, which is one of the reasons I love seeing young women like yourself. I mean, you're young enough to be my daughter. So when I see the amount of wisdom coming out of a woman your age. It's like a gift to the world. And so, I would encourage you and all other women like you to stop referring to God as a man, because there's no such thing as a man that gives birth to anything but a bowel movement.
Well said.
And sometimes we complain about the pain of that. Hello, everybody. I sure hope you're enjoying this awesome podcast. I sure am. If there's anything at all we've learned in the past 3 years, it's that not making an honest effort to be fit and healthy can have disastrous effects. It has always amazed me that there are countless thousands of diet books, online diet programs, countless books and online gurus offering get big, get fit quick programs, and biohackers offering solutions for everything from herpes to hemorrhoids. But we are the sickest and most unfit people to ever populate this planet. Clearly, something is wrong. The average American today spends $13,000 a year on medical expenses, and most countries are not much different for all the same reasons. Diets seldom work for any length of time because the human body is very dynamic, with ever-changing needs that require flexible individual approaches to meeting your individual needs. Our food and water supply is well known to be toxic, and most people don't realize that about 95% of the supplements sold are of low quality, are often oxidized from sitting in warehouses for long periods before reaching the customer, and are made from non-organic source products, often making your body more toxic, imbalanced, and stressed, which is no help at all. Exercise programs often don't get good results because people don't know how to determine what exercise their body needs to be balanced, and often over or under exercise. Additionally, eating if they are dieting and exercising but don't have the skills needed for effective mental emotional self-management, chances are good that they will have a hard time listening to their bodies and sticking to the best programs. It doesn't have to be that way. That's exactly why I founded the Chek Institute for Holistic Health and Performance in 1995. We are still going strong, helping more people today than ever look great, feel great, and have the career that they've always dreamed of. There is nothing more rewarding than helping others to look good, feel good, and create their dreams. At 62 years of age, I'm still healthy, fit, and strong. I have multiple businesses, a farm, young children, and all the duties of a papa. Living holistically is the secret behind my tangible success. In my 40-year career in holistic health and high-performance exercise, orthopedic rehabilitation, holistic health, holistic diet and lifestyle coaching, I've traveled the world seeking out the top experts in every field related to holistic health and all aspects of rehabilitation and human performance. I was raised on a fully functional farm and have studied soil science and made a comprehensive study of why people have a hard time changing and how to help them achieve their dreams and create the life they truly want. My life's work is synthesized in the Chek Academy, which offers excellent, practical, effective training for everyone. If you want to master your own health and well-being, are a serious athlete seeking optimal long-term performance and longevity, or are an exercise or healthcare professional wanting to master holistic health as an approach to helping people heal efficiently and effectively, the Chek Academy has tried and tested training that will support your dreams. If you are ready to achieve mastery of your health and performance, become the best in your field as an exercise or healthcare professional, and learn to address the whole person with genuine, tried and tested holistic approaches, the Chek Academy is for you. If you are tired of the humdrum of your usual job and feel called to enter a career in holistic health, the Chek Academy offers everything you need. You can master the basics efficiently and begin making an income doing what you love to do. As your clientele builds and you progress in the Chek Academy, you can cut back on your old job and more fully engage a new, rewarding career in holistic health. Want a preview? You can check out the Chek Academy e-learning platform for a limited time with the open house we are currently offering. Academy enrollment ends this month and spaces are filling fast. We are limited to 100 spaces for this intake, so if you are genuinely interested, apply now. Go to chek.group/open house L4D. That's chek.group/open house L4D. Think you'll really enjoy what we have to share with all of you. Now, we've been hitting on this a little bit there is a lot said regarding water in scriptures and myths, but particularly origin myths. I'd love it if you can share an overview of what particularly the myths say about water and what you interpret that these myths are telling us about water and its importance for us to not only importance to consciousness, but to be conscious of. I've studied, I don't know, I would imagine at this point I've probably studied about 30 or 40 origin myths, all oriented around water. And I put a bunch of them in my chapters on water and spirit gym, but I couldn't put them all in there because it would be 30 or 40 pages of nothing but water myths. But, from my studies, there's quite a lot of deep, profound truths in there. I would love to hear, what do you feel some of these origin myths are? And are there any that you would like to share?
Yeah, I love this topic. It's as you said, it's so deep. There are so many. You can find water myths in every single culture all around the world, dating back forever, regardless of whom you ask in any culture. When you say, just creation myths, just starting there. If you say, how did this whole world actually start? You'll hear from every culture it started with water. And the more we understand about water's role in existence, the more we see that water is, in fact, the creatrix of this world and not just this planet, but maybe the whole 3D world, this whole plane of existence. And even if you look at the modern scientific creation myth, which is also a myth, it's just the story that we tell ourselves in the world right now. It says, in the beginning, the earth was covered in oceans. Before the appearance of continents and Pangea, there was Panthalassa, which was this primordial super ocean. And that's what but there wasn't even breathable air back then. So it was this water that gave birth to breathable air. It gave birth to oxygen and the atmosphere, and then eventually it gave birth to the land, and that water actually gives birth to all of the other elements in this way. And that then there was the primordial soup, and that gave birth to life, and then eventually the life learned to carry the oceans within it in its own bloodstream, right? The only reason why we're able to walk on land is because we carry those primordial oceans within us as our own blood. And here we are today. Our blood has the same mineral ratios as the ocean back then in the Cambrian period. So when you look at all of these indigenous myths, you can see that they're not just archaic, they're not irrelevant, they're absolutely mirrored in everything that we've been discovering, and that there's actually far deeper truths layered into them in so many ways, because in every one that I've found, there's either water or a water god at the beginning of creation. The Iroquois say in the beginning there was only a watery abyss, and then the Lenape tribe say that first the earth was covered in water, and there was a giant swirling cloud of water vapor where the Great Spirit moved, and then the turtle came up from that carrying creation on its back. And there's a Norse creation myth that involves, what's one of my favorite, it involves every single form of water coming together: mist and streams and fog and frost, and all of these meeting together to create the world. And again, there are just countless examples, but what I find really interesting is that they almost all describe the very first waters, these waters of creation, as being a lot like the ether, this non-physical
Oh,
water.
yes.
And then
Yes, I was just
usually,
about to, I was just writing down to ask you that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I know you know all about that. I read your chapter on the ether, and of course, my jaw was on the ground the whole time. I loved it. But they usually describe it like this ocean of energy, like dark fluid almost. Like we were speaking a bit before about the Kogi cosmology, and how their word for spirit or ether is the same as their word for water, aluna. And their creation story says, in the beginning there was a blackness, there was only the sea, and the sea was the mother. And the mother was not people, she was not anything, she was nothing at all. She was dark, she was memory, and she was potential. And I love that description, that she was memory and she was potential, because non-physical and physical waters share this in common. So dark energy or ether, which is super fluid in nature, is a lot like this as well, right? And in Egypt, I love their description as well. They say that basically when our spirits, which are droplets of liquid consciousness that decide to take human form. We are given physical water. We're given our bodies of water as a gift, almost like a consolation prize for the burden of being incarnated. The Egyptians say that the gods were like, hey, the world can be a really tough place, but at least there's this magic thing called water that kind of makes it worth the trouble. And water was given to us as a consolation prize for the pain in the ass of being here.
Yeah, yeah. It's really to segue slightly on that. I mean, I think you know how much I study
Mhm.
and practice and spend a lot of time in meditation and things like that. But if God is God, that for which there is no other, then God has no way to know itself except to look into itself and dream itself into existence, which makes all sentient beings agents of God experience. God is having the Isabel friend experience, the Paul Chek experience. Each of us is God expressing one of its potentials, allowing God to experience itself and become conscious of itself through these experiences. So, you know, because consciousness is a psychic substance produced not blindly, but in living awareness of opposites. You can't have consciousness without opposites. Then God has to create the illusion of duality in order for there to be a conscious experience. And the primordial waters is almost like the alchemical melting pot in which everything is created. But the challenge of the world is that God has to experience its negative potentials as well as its positive potentials, just like water can be a detoxifier, which means it carries the poisons away, or it can be that which carries joy and love. So I think the challenge of the world is that we're all here, as you know, the word Ram Dass means God worker, and we're all here really as expressions of the divine, helping God come to be aware of what it is, which a lot of people have a hard time with because they have this notion that God is perfect and that we're something ejected from or separate from God. But that means you don't understand that God means prime source. There's nothing here that can be here that didn't come from God and isn't sustained by God. So we're really all God experiencing itself. But the point is, because consciousness requires these two complementary but opposite polarities, being alive in a three-dimensional reality is really quite a challenge, because the pain is what awakens you, or the opportunities, but oftentimes it comes by pain, to become conscious instead of unconscious, and as you know, water can become unconscious if it's kept in dead straight pipes or locked in containers where it doesn't get exposure to natural rhythms. So it kind of falls asleep as well. And then we can pray to it, invigorate it. We can bring it into our bodies and do Tai Chi and activate it and harmonize it and structure it and fill it full of consciousness and wake it up. So I think that there's just all these amazing parallels between water and God, but at the same time, as you said, we're 99.95% water molecules, yet we're individual agents of consciousness having very unique experiences. I mean, no matter how hard I try, I cannot parallel the experiences of Isabel Friend. I don't have the same mental structure. I don't have the same body. I don't have the same history. But at the same time, I have the same hormones and I have the same glands and organs. It's just, think, put it simply, take any musical instrument, you hand it to 100 people, give them the same song, it'll sound different every time, because they're all slightly putting their own self into it. So I think it's just quite of a stunningly beautiful, magnificent mystery. And I think that if people would embrace some of these deep spiritual concepts and really see the reverence of realizing that we are living in and on and as the body of God, then everything would be sacred, right? The water would be sacred, the earth would be sacred, the trees, the birds, the butterflies, the bees. we've gotten so lost. We've gotten as lost in our understanding and relationship to God as we have to water, to the soil, to the air, and to all the things that matter. And it just makes me happy to know there's people like you out there waking people up to these more sacred, basic principles, because water is the basis of life. Without water, air, and food, and earth, soil, you got no place to have an experience. It's a long ways to the next planet that you can live like this.
Absolutely. So many beautiful points that you made there and concepts that you touched on, and it's so true that each of us is a body of water. We're each pretty much 100% water, 99.89 to 99.95%, and yet the crystalline matrix of that water, the way that it's programmed by all of the vibrations and the memories that we have that get stored in our fascia, that's 80% water, that gets programmed by, our DNA, which is an antenna, and our DNA is even, has a backbone of water. The only reason it's in its chiral shape is because it's mostly these clathrate water molecules. Like everything in us is water that's always being dynamically responding to its environment and creating the unique geometric structures that will be the frequency that we resonate and emanate in the world. And it's like, how can we all be water and all be so utterly unique? How can water, which has been around since the dawn of time, never have created two snowflakes that are exactly alike? That alone still astounds me, that water itself never duplicates a single snowflake, and all of the, quadrillions of just infinite snowflakes that have been in existence, that within water there is something that is encoded with the infinite, with infinite potential for variation, with infinite potential for expression, with infinite potential for receptivity and interpretation, and that there's nothing else like that in the entire universe. And even though when we're talking about water, we're talking about, you know, hydrogen and oxygen, it's like, well, how does God create all of the entirety of the multiplicity of the multifaceted spectrum of experience through just the simplicity of duality, right? Everything is an expression of shades of duality along this spectrum of yin and yang. Well, in the same way, water creates this infinite spectrum of expression by just being a dipolar molecule that has a north pole and a south pole, by just being two simple atoms, hydrogen and oxygen, or two hydrogens and oxygen that come together in these various ways. And water, in so many ways, it's like they say it's like Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said something to the extent that we can't understand God, but we can understand water. And by understanding water, which is like God, we can understand God, or we can understand the Tao, right? It's like you said, if we're inside the mind of God, we can't understand something that we're inside of, because we'll never have the objective perspective to be able to look at it, externally, because we're inside of it. But we can look at water, and then water is kind of like, I think of water as being like the axis point upon which the maxim as above, so below, as within, so without turns. The reason
Yeah, it's a
why
good point. Yep.
Mhm. The reason why I feel that's true is because of the way that water works. When you look deep into the center of water, you see the wholeness and the entirety of the universe. If you look at the character of water, you see the character of the divine. If you look into our bodies of water, you see that an exact mirror of the earth, which is also a body of water. You see the same kinds of hydrological cycles, the same kinds of watersheds, the same kinds of processes, and all of these holographic mirrors are kind of sustained by the beauty of the simplicity of the oneness and the duality, which are really embodied by water in these different ways.
Yeah, really, it's fun to look at these parallels and, see the magic of water. It really does hang in the balance in many ways between yin and yang, male and female, because it can go either way. Obviously, there's hot, steamy, powerful male expressions of water, and there's also cool, feminine, nurturing yin expressions of water. You can use high pressure water to cut steel. You got enough pressure, you can use water like a saw, almost like a laser beam. I believe it's Chang Tzu that speaks of the pivot of the Tao. And the pivot of the Tao is the place that it's not yin and it's not yang, much like the Holy Trinity, where you have Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or Brahma, Shiva, Krishna. All the religions have Holy Trinities. But in my system, you have zero as unconditional love, then you have zero as the negative, which is the no thing of creation, the spirit realm, and then you have the something of zero, the positive expression. So the pivot of the Tao would be zero that is unconditional, not polarized. And it makes me think of how water is the axis of the flow of consciousness, which is oscillating from yin to yang or masculine to feminine in a myriad of expressions. If you think of music and how many variations you can get just off the notes available on a guitar or a keyboard or a flute, it's quite varied. I mean, we listen to music from all over the world, and Persian music can sound radically different than American country western music, for example. And water is that diverse. And interestingly, as you know, water can carry all of it, right? Water can carry every sound, every vibration, every shade of light.
Seen and unseen, heard and unheard. Mhm.
Yeah, so there you see, there it is, very much like the pivot of the Tao. So I'm just saying, I think your conception of water as this balancing point, which makes it ideal as a carrier of consciousness because it's so flexible, it can go in either direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Water has actually been described as being the world's most malleable computer. I think it was Dr. Rustum Roy who said that because it does have this binary aspect to it, right? But it's actually, if you look at the valence states of oxygen, all of the information in the entire internet, right? Every cat picture in existence, the way that you and I are talking to each other right now, it's all ones and zeros. It's all the binary, the way that the information is encoded. And so water can encode in that way, like we just explored. Water also has this completely different way of encoding with the valence states of the electrons of oxygen that give it 6 different valence states. So there's 0 and +1 and -1 and +2 and -2, etc. And if you do the math on the way that water encodes with 6 rather than a binary, a hexary rather than a binary, every single cluster of water molecules is able to encode something like a billion times more information than even the world's most advanced supercomputer. And then when you look at those clusters as well, which typically, the clusters of water molecules range anywhere from, you know, 2 or 3 to 60 or more water molecules altogether, arranged in various patterns. And the strength of the hydrogen bonds and the angles of the hydrogen bonds really determine the crystallinity and the symmetry and all of those different things. But it's been found that water has, at minimum, each one of these clusters, which functions as a memory cell, kind of like the memory on a computer, right? Each one of these clusters has at minimum 440,000 panels on it. And those are just the panels, the smallest that we're able to measure with our current scientific devices. But if we had more powerful devices, we would be able to see that each one of those panels is further subdivided in a fractal way into more and more and more panels, so that at minimum
Infinitely.
400, infinite, exactly. So an infinite amount of information can be coded because each one of those panels is responsible for sensing and storing and transmitting and amplifying and transducing information, vibration, and frequency. And then when you look at the hydrogen and you see that the proton at the center of hydrogen, as soon as that electron dances away from it, has the exact geometry of a black hole, that it is, in fact, a double tetrahedron black hole spinning inside of this torus of energy. I mean, I don't really like the language of particle physics. I don't really think they're these like little billiard balls bouncing around, but there's this toroidal field of energy that densifies in this point that the proton is basically a black hole according to Nassim Haramein, and pierce through to the heart of the universe. So all of this information is being coded through the binary and the hexary, and it's being filtered down through all of these layers of these at least 440,000, but infinite panels down into these very well guarded, well protected hydrogen. So at least according to Victor Schauberger's model of the way that the water clusters are set up, where the oxygens would arrange themselves on the outside and the hydrogens would arrange themselves on the inside, sort of like a Searle motor. If you're familiar with the free energy device, the Searle motor, where it's magnets spinning around each other, and the way that they spin with the outer ring and the inner ring is able to generate free energy ad infinitum, or at least nearly free energy. And Victor Schauberger said he believed that, basically that was one of the ways that water generates free energy, is by being arranged in this way, where kind of the more masculine oxygen, which is the more gravitative, it's the more warming element, and it kind of stands guard around the more feminine hydrogens that are in there, that are negatively charged, and they're more they're more levitative, and they have more of these feminine principles. So it's not just the fact that water has this duality, but how is the duality actually arranged? And you see that there's this beautiful model even within water for the masculine and the feminine dynamic itself, where the masculine takes on this kind of protector principle, and the feminine kind of rests back in this like energy generating mode and communion through these black hole hydrogens with the source, this oracular kind of mode.
Yes, I think also it's important to see water in its analog state, wave state. If you look at quantum physics, the quantum realm is a wave realm, and only when we observe does it take on any particular particle type formation from double slit experiments, for example. But even if you play digital music, you've got to play it through a speaker system, which is wave based. It's causing oscillations of the air, which is producing waves of sound. John Stewart Reed said sound doesn't come in waves, it comes in bubbles. But most sound engineers speak of sound as waves, and we're all familiar with good vibrations. But I've written quite a lot and studied a lot of the foundation meanings and teachings of Ohm, AUM underscore. And Joseph Campbell describes the meaning of Ohm as ah, I awaken, ooh, I'm dreaming, living my dream, I'm falling asleep, underscore. So if you take a zero line, a zero reference, which would be source, ah, I awaken, I'm dreaming would be the positive cycle of the wave. I'm falling asleep would be the negative, and then it reaches the zero line, which is the underscore, which is end of cycle. So Ohm's actually the master code of every single analog cycle, from the life of a subatomic quark or particle that flashes in and out of existence to that of a universe. In the Hindu scriptures speak of the cycle of Brahma or Vishnu, and how whole universes come into existence. They proliferate, they grow, just like a living organism. Then they go to sleep and everything comes to an end and it all starts over again. So the point being is, I think that the wave state of our voice, the cycles of the sun and the moon, those are all analog cycles, and water is also very responsive to waves of emotion, thought waves, psychic energy. So I think ultimately what we're both saying is that water, you can look at it through the lens of a binary system, a 6-phase system, a wave system, and it responds to all of them, which again just shows you the miraculous nature of water. And the you know this, but for the listeners, the research on water is friggin' mind-boggling because it responds to 65 octaves of vibration. Now, for most people, they wouldn't know what that is. A keyboard on a piano is 7 octaves. So to get to 65 octaves, you'd have to line up. What would that be? 8 times 7 is 56. 9 times 7 is 63. So you'd have to have, I think, 9 keyboards. Imagine being a musician trying to play 9 keyboards at once. And a friend of mine, Sean O'Lear, who's an amazing, amazing man, he was excommunicated from the Catholic priesthood for teaching real spirituality. He's been on my podcast a couple of times, and he's absolutely mind-blowing. If you haven't heard my podcast, anybody with Sean O'Lear, you got to listen to it. And the one coming up, if it might be out by the time this one airs, but he's a mathematician. So I said to Sean, I said, would you please calculate the number or in frequency of what 65 octaves is? And the number was so big,
Oh my god.
I don't even know if there's a name for it. I mean, it was just this massive, massive number.
Oof.
I mean, it's really bordering on infinity.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and water updates its information 1 trillion times a second,
Mhm.
right? So like you can, there's nothing that you can do to make something happen faster than water can be aware of it.
Yep. Yep. It's
Nothing.
aware
There's
before
nothing
we
you
are.
can do. It's aware
Absolutely.
before we
It's
are.
way before we are. Yeah. And when you start getting into that, like it just boggles the mind. There's so many ways in which water just boggles my. We literally cannot wrap our heads around it. Like the vibration of 65 octaves. Like we can't wrap our heads around that. We can't wrap our heads around the fact that, when water absorbs a photon, it's going to re-emit that at a frequency of 1 quadrillion hertz. We can't conceptualize of what a quadrillion hertz is. That's not a number that that we could ever conceive of. And yet water can encode the infinite within itself in these different ways that just, we'll never in 100 million years get to the point of developing anything as intelligent as water, because water is nature's intelligence. Water is the intelligence of the universe in form. Everyone is so obsessed with AI right now and artificial intelligence, but AI can eat its heart out because we have the original intelligence that encodes infinity and puts us in direct contact and communion with the very heart of God through the power of prayer and resonance, and the way our biowater can carry those signals all the way through black hole hydrogen to the center of the quantum field. Like nothing will ever compare to that.
You brought up a very important point there. And I say to people all the time, aren't you a little bit concerned that the word artificial is in front of the word intelligence? I mean, that should be deeply concerning. Water, which we are, everything we've just said about water is about us.
Yeah.
It's about the plants. It's about the trees, the microorganisms. That's living intelligence. That's official intelligence. I get very concerned when I see billions and billions and even trillions of dollars being poured into artificial intelligence and people living in virtual realities.
Oh.
The tree on your telephone doesn't need water, doesn't need love, and it doesn't bear fruit. So when you start living in an artificial world and you forget about the reality of the analog world that gives us a body, that gives us breath, that gives us life, that gives us the chance to have children and to really live and love fully and express love as nurture. Nature cleans, nature feeds, nature nurtures, and nature protects. Cleans, feeds, nurtures, and protects. Water cleans, feeds, nurtures, and protects. Will artificial intelligence do that?
Never.
I mean, people need to really seriously realize how dangerously far we're getting from what gives us the ability to actually live, love, dream, create and grow together versus what is an illusory reality, which God's willing to explore that too, because the answer is always yes from unconditional love. The question is that bringing you closer to your wholeness? Is it bringing you into your center? Is it bringing you into a state of reverence for life? Or is it taking you into an illusion where there isn't a call from the heart for reverence because you're lost in the illusions that the mind can generate through artificial intelligence? And you mentioned before about computers. Most people aren't aware. I don't know if you are aware. Have you ever heard of the Cray supercomputer?
The Cray supercomputer? No.
Yeah, it was the most powerful computer in the world, but now that they've got quantum computers, but even in quantum computers, from the research I've done, the Cray supercomputer and some of the new quantum computers use water as the hard drive.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard
So
about
in the most powerful computation systems in the world, water is the hard drive. And interestingly, scientists were asking a very important question. How in the world could a few water molecules store so much information? And Greg Braden spoke about this on one of his shows. And there's actually research done by the US military and some other company that does advanced tech research, but they found that the information's not actually being stored in the water itself, that the water is in resonance with a field, which is non-local, and the field is storing the information. So water actually is, again, this amazing intermediary, just like it's the intermediary between the spirit realm as above and the physical realm so below, as below so above, that the water is actually a mediator of a field. And that field could be the noosphere, the field of mind, which is in alchemy in resonance with the air element. So the point is that water is actually more mysterious than most people can even imagine. And most scientists that are legitimately researching water find the deeper they go into it, the more mysterious it gets, kind of like God. You know, I tell people, the more you know about God, the less you know about God. And that's one of the things about God and water. They're paradoxical. If you can't handle a paradox, you'll reach an impasse where your mind will just start melting down. And that's why I think spiritual practices are so important, because spiritual practices take you out of the intellect and into the heart and into the experience, where you learn things through experience. Like, you can read about love all you want, but there's no better way to learn about love than loving itself, right? So I think that's where the practice of relating to water and the practice of having a relationship with God, instead of memorizing stuff written on paper by somebody else, that's somebody else's experience. We each need to develop our own authentic, loving, unique, intimate experience with water, so we understand it and what it means for us and how it works for us. And we also have to do the same thing with source, whatever a person wants to call God. We're so trapped in believing everybody else's ideas that we walk around with a head full of ideas, but we never know if they're true. And one of the things artificial intelligence is doing is flooding the world with so damn many ideas, nobody knows what's true anymore. So people just go in circles and give up, and that makes you susceptible to the BS factory. And all I'm saying is, it's high time for us to do exactly what you've done with water. And that's why I love the fact that you teach these workshops, because I've got close personal friends that have done workshops, Steve and Marina and others that I know that have done workshops with you, and came back just in a state of exuberance and just in love with water, and having a much more intimate relationship with water. You know, like little things like pay attention to how you feel when you're in a bath or a shower. For me, I meditate in the cold plunge, and I literally connect to the spirit of the water itself and speak to it. I do a prayer before I get into the cold plunge. I put my hands in the water and I say, spirits, where we live here, our property is called Rainbow Hills, and the section of Fallbrook we live in is also called Rainbow. So I refer to the water in my cold plunge as rainbow water. They say, "Dear rainbow water spirits, would you like to join me in body, mind, and spirit and live and love more fully together?" And the water always says, "Yes, come on in. Let's make love together, you know?" And it's just little things like that. Because if you just think water is just forever around and it's just going to be in the tap all the time, and you don't really realize how it's being tortured and how, how we're treating water like we treat information. There's so much of it, we don't really pay attention to it until we're eating junk food that is being sold as some kind of a super sports bar, or drinking Gatorade instead of water, thinking it's going to make us stronger and faster. So I just really am grateful for the example you're giving to people of having a legitimate relationship with water, studying it, getting to know it at a deeper spiritual level. Hello to all of you. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you all for joining me and helping make the world a better place for all living beings each day. I suspect most of you are aware that people are having a harder time sleeping than ever, and you may be one of them. As you can imagine, there are many reasons for this, but the turmoil in the world is surely enough to keep most people's adrenaline and cortisol running high, obstructing one's ability to get deep, restful sleep when it is needed most. But you don't want to lose sleep when parenting demands are high, jobs require alertness for performance and injury prevention, and the ultimate safety and security is your own health. There is no method of regeneration and vitalization more powerful than sleep. One of the challenges with many of the sleep aids I've tested is that they often include melatonin or ingredients that stimulate melatonin production specifically. Any such product has left me feeling jet-lagged upon waking and feeling as though my natural hormone rhythms have been disrupted, and I know many others have reported that to me as well. As is so often the case, Organifi come to the rescue with an all-natural, non-melatonin-based sleep product. Organifi Sleep is a carefully crafted nighttime blend with a powerful blend of amino acids and organic herbs that promotes relaxation and facilitates a deeper, more restful sleep. A truly holistic solution for a rejuvenating and peaceful night's sleep. Organifi Sleep is easy to use. Just add it to water or any of your favorite nighttime beverages, stir, and drink for a beautiful, restful sleep. Wake up revitalized, energized, and ready to be your best in all that you do each day. To get your Organifi Sleep, go to organifi.com/CHEK20. That's Organifi.com/Chek20, CHEK20. To get your 20% off, use the promo code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K, 20 for 20% off on checkout. Enjoy a deep, restful sleep with Organifi Sleep. I know you know very well that Masaru Emoto and other researchers have shown that water is very responsive to consciousness. What have you learned in this regard, and how does your knowledge and experience of water's response to consciousness influence how you interact with it, handle it, and consume it? You've talked some about your water rituals, but really knowing what you know about water's own consciousness and interface with consciousness, what words would you share with the listeners in that regard, and how might that impact their understanding and relationship with water?
Mm. Water's relationship to consciousness, I think, is perfectly exemplified in what you shared about this supercomputer, where the information is not stored directly in the water itself, but that water is in touch with this field. And this field, which, we could assume that it's the etheric field because there are a lot of, things to point us in that direction, is a field of pure consciousness, right? There was a study that was done by a dear friend of mine, who's an incredible water scientist, where he would expose water to really harmful negative frequencies and vibrations. And if done long enough, the water would do something that other scientists thought absolutely impossible. It would actually send a pulse backwards into the computer equipment that was sending it and almost exploded the equipment. When he told
Oh, that's
researchers,
beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. She's powerful. She's a fucking badass. And when
Yeah,
he told other
not everybody's
scientists that this happened, they were like, "No, water couldn't do that. Water couldn't do that." And water can basically do whatever she wants. She's not going to put up with poor treatment. She's not going to, you know, accept that. But then he found that when instead of just exposing the water to this frequency in a very sustained, continuous way, if instead he gave it a break, if he gave it one break a break for 1 hour, I forget if it was every 23 hours or every 26 hours, but it was slightly off from a 24-hour rhythm. And he gave the water a break for 1 hour. And during that time, the water had a chance to integrate the information that it had received, or we can assume send that information to the field and then have that information come back from the field. The water responded the way that the water responded the next time it was exposed to that frequency. The water had refined it by the phi ratio. So the water had actually evolved that frequency by the golden mean, by the divine proportion. The water had taken this very disharmonious signal, this very harmful signal, translated it through the field of consciousness, which we know is pure love, as you've said a couple of times during our conversation so far. It's all unconditional love. How do we know that? Well, this is one of the ways that we know it, because, rather than coming back as the same harmful frequency or an even further degraded frequency, water lovingly and with care and with the tenderness that you described before upgrades that, because she is conscious and she is directly in tune with this loving field of consciousness. So she could take that harmful frequency and do very complex mathematical equations to come up with the exact frequency that would be refined exactly by the phi ratio. So this is the process of evolution. This is how things evolve. This is how nature grows and evolves and continues to prosper in this way, is because of the intelligence of water. And also, when we look at our own consciousness, obviously consciousness is not centered in the brain. Of course, we both know that, but we can look at brainwaves for an interesting reflection of the way that we as bodies of water interact with the field of consciousness. And when you do that and you take a reading of brainwaves of people who are in states of bliss and communion and love, if you take two tantric practitioners and you put them together and get them in this state of absolute unconditional love for one another, and you do a brainwave reading at that time, you'll see the exact geometry of hydrogen in their brainwaves.
Oh, wow.
Hydrogen, of
That's
course,
amazing.
being hydrogen. In Latin, hydro is water, gen is creator. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I feel that,
Generation.
yeah, I feel that hydrogen is not only the spirit of water, but in fact the Holy Spirit itself that's spoken of in the scriptures, that which is the divine animating consciousness that connects us to God, to everything that is, that connects the physical to the non-physical, and is the purveyor of energy, vibration, frequency, and prayer. And that when we're in these states of consciousness of pure love, we can see the beauty and the geometry of hydrogen coming through. So, if the etheric field is the field of consciousness, and as I mentioned before, I feel that the etheric field is the mind of water and not the Holy Spirit, and hydrogen is the spirit of water, whereas the solid, liquid, gas, and plasma is the body of water. Well, the same friend of mine, Jonathan Butts, the scientist who did that study, he believes that um, the ether is the masculine polarity, whereas physical water is the feminine polarity, and that you can no more separate them than you can separate the yin from the yang, but that the etheric field is pure consciousness, never changing, ever present, whereas water, of course, is always changing and always dynamically varied and expressive, and receiving and giving and shifting. And so she's more of the feminine form, but that they hold this polarity where consciousness and water are one and the same. And we know that water is acutely responsive to consciousness, to every thought we have. I mean, this is one of the most beautiful aspects, I think, of having this reciprocal communion and this personal relationship with water, because it is so intimate. There is no other being, no matter how much time you spend with them or how much you love them, who will ever know the textures of your consciousness in the way that water does. Water knows the subtle vibratory frequencies of every thought you have, even the ones you would never admit to another human being. She knows, the colors and the themes and the emotions and every dream you have, even the ones that we forget the next morning when we wake up. Water was there in the light filled cerebral spinal fluid of the central ventricle, where dreams are projected onto the massa intermedia. That's a function of water. As the Kogi say, even our dream states are functions of the holographic matrix of water. She knows your dreams. She knows the texture of your saliva. She knows the taste of your sweat. Only a lover would know the taste of your sweat. She knows the temperature of the inside of your blood vessels and what it feels like to flow in them. There's no other relationship that is that intimate. And when you recognize that water is conscious and has this direct access to consciousness itself, I feel like it's this beautiful intimate communion, the most intimate communion that we'll ever have. Moses Hackman said that water is the glove on the hand of consciousness, that it's the way that God enacts any change in the physical world. There's no change without water. Every single enzymatic reaction that takes place in the body, every reaction at all that takes place in the body is a function of water. The way that light affects any biological being, the way that it affects our atmosphere, the way that it affects temperatures, the way that the sun has any effect on the earth whatsoever is through the phase changes of water. Whether we're talking about fluctuating sea surface temperatures or cloud microphysics, it's only water that mediates the effect of light and of warmth. So all change is an effect of water. And so water resonates with these prismatic projections of consciousness in the same way that light is shone through water droplets to create a rainbow. So I feel like, in a way, when consciousness shines through water, it creates the prismatic spectrum that we call reality, in the same way that when light shines through water, it creates a rainbow, which is, I didn't describe that very well in my head. It made more sense, but we
I
know.
understood it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a famous sort of, you could call it scientific question, but it's also a psychological question, and it's a simple question: is a rainbow real?
Mm.
Some scientists say no, it's not real. It's an illusion. But you get a rainbow by refracting light through water. Sunlight hits the water droplets and it produces a rainbow. So the question is a rainbow real? Is actually a deep psychological question, because it's actually saying, if you see the rainbow and you perceive the rainbow, most people have a very positive emotional response to a rainbow. So if the rainbow is perceptible and it's causing an emotional shift in you, or an associative change, because, if you, for example, if your association with rainbows is positive, then you automatically link up your associations with the experience, which produces thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So if it produces that as a consistent psychological response in an individual, that would make it real. But from a scientific perspective, many scientists say that it's not real, it's just a mirage. So you see how the concept of the rainbow, the light and the water, can actually stand in this intermediary space where one can perceive it as unreal and an illusion, or as very real and very beautiful and very heart touching. And that just again shows you the dynamics of the psyche and how unconditional love says yes to everything.
And it's the same with reality. Is reality real, or is reality an
Right.
illusion? Well, reality is only experienceable through these bodies of water. Everything we see with our eyes, the lens of your eye is 99% water, right? All of your senses are through the perception of water. So when consciousness comes through water, we have this experience that we call reality, right? Is it real or is it an illusion? There was actually one of the most recent Nobel Prizes, I think it was just last year, was given for finally proving the concept of non-local realism. Basically, there's been this, concept, I know you're familiar with it in quantum physics, where the idea is that if something is not being directly perceived, does it actually exist? If a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it actually make a sound? And of course, there's been hot debate over this. Well, the scientists apparently proved and were given a Nobel Prize for proving in some way that actually non-locally, there is no reality, there is no tangible reality to anything that's not being directly perceived. You can't directly perceive anything except through water. So it's like this Kogi concept of the hologram of water is so true in a way, because consciousness cast through it is what creates our perception of reality. And apparently, through these Nobel Prize studies, reality itself is just a function of our perceptions and doesn't have its own endogenous objective existence in and of itself, right?
Yeah. One of my favorite definitions of reality, I don't remember where I got it. It might have been in a conversation with my buddy Laird Hamilton, because he's pretty good that way. But the definition of reality is what's happening right now.
Mhm.
And what's happening right now is unique to all of us, right? You and I both eating the same piece of chocolate can be both going, wow, this is great. But if I could be fused into your body, your mind, your emotions, your senses, and say, okay, what is great to Isabel? I might be surprised at how different of an experience great is to me, and vice versa. You jump in my body, go, wow, Paul really has a completely unique experience of great that I never even knew. And I could be going, wow, I really like yours. I'm going to take some of that back with me. And together it would become more great because of it. So, reality is what's happening right now. That leans back to artificial intelligence, because, whenever we create illusions, we're making something happen that could be a departure from the reality of what is happening right now to sustain life itself, you know? And that's something that I think a lot of people need to meditate on quite deeply. I wrote down some comments while you were talking, just because I wanted to let you flow, because I'm enjoying what you're sharing.
Oh, one thing before you go on to that, I just wanna say really quickly that I love that definition of reality, and so simple and so profound, and this is why I've always resonated so much with tantric and Epicurean philosophies and practices, because they really teach you to, as a skill, as a practice, the way that you would hone, learning an instrument or something like that. You learn to play the instrument of your body to become so much more acutely and perceptively aware of what's happening right now, that most of us walk around with most of our senses completely turned off, or at least very dulled. And so we're not in direct contact with reality. We're not in direct perception of the aliveness of what is happening right now. And that's a skill that you can train through tantric and Epicurean practices. And reality does shift and become so much more alive and more vibrant, so that your great, as you were saying, can actually expand and be greater and greater and greater. Like there's actually no limit to how joyful and pleasurable or real and sensory reality can be, if you really, you know, place your awareness into this magical body water temple and train it in that way. I think it's one of the most fun parts of being alive.
I think that's why mindfulness training is so important for people, because just as you described with Tantra, that's a form of mindfulness. And I think we really have reached the point where we're paradoxically so in our minds, our heads, that we're not mindful anymore. Think about it. If you're driving your car down the road and you're not present with the fact that you're driving, you could run over a kid or go through a red light and crash and not even know you did it because you were not present in the moment. And I think part of really learning and growing, like, you couldn't have the knowledge of water you have if you hadn't been present with it, mindful of it. But, mindful isn't even a fair enough word, because there's a lot of experience that we can have that goes beyond mind. Like when a woman's giving birth, she's not sitting there thinking about it step by step. She's 100% present in the moment and the experience of it. So it's beyond the mind. But conceptually, to be mindful means to be present with what's happening, preferably without a lot of judgment, because as soon as you start judging, you're linking into associations from memory, so it pulls you out of the moment. Like being in a flow state as an athlete or an artist or a musician, you're not in your head minding it. In fact, you're beyond it. You're more really in a state of love and reverence and flow for what's happening in the now, which there's reality again, what's happening. But my point being is, I think that the tantric conception and the mindfulness concept is more important now than ever, because we're destroying the ecosystems of the planet while we're falling in love with virtual reality headsets, and AI is impersonating everything from artists to video. I mean, it's like we run the risk of letting go of our contact of, appreciation of, and connection to what feeds, nurtures, protects, and there's one more: feeds, nurtures, protects. But those are sort of think of the amniotic fluid when an infant, a neonate, is in its mother's womb. It's getting fed, it's getting nurtured through her thoughts, feelings, emotions, the sound of her heartbeat, the warmth of the water. The water is taking the toxins out of the fetus. It's delivering hormones. It's really a living environment where the child is not in a mindful state of experience. It's in a state of really full awareness and full presence. I would say full presence. And I think if we had more practices for presencing ourselves, so that we really were in the experience of, instead of the mental conjuring of and judging of, then we would probably be able to realize the power and the beauty of water just through being present with it. The old saying, you don't know what you got till it's gone. You get really aware of water when you can't find any and you need it.
Yeah.
Then it becomes something you pray to.
Right. You don't need gold in the desert when you're thirsty. You need water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Previously, we were talking about water, the computers, and I said that research showed that water is actually interfacing with a field, which could be probably as a non-local field, because information fields, scalar fields, can be non-local. And there's lots of great research on scalar fields that I've studied. But Rumi said something very beautiful that I will couple with something that Einstein said. Then I would like to share an experiment I have in one of my books in my library that I think will correlate exactly with what you said earlier. Rumi said, beyond judgment, there's a field. I'll meet you there. Well, what is the field that's beyond judgment? It's unconditional love. It's God. Einstein said the field is the sole governing agency of the particle, which means that the consciousness behind judgment that is not polarized, which is the pivot of the Tao, is the governing agency of the particle, because everything is being expressed from the place of the unconditional. The way I describe it in my Spirit Gym series is, God is unconditional love, but God had to create conditions to love itself unconditionally, because something that's unconditional can't experience something, because to have an experience requires a condition. Consciousness requires conditions. the analogy I give is if you take two perfectly polished mirrors and point them at each other and ask them to describe what they're seeing, they will have nothing to say because they're looking both into an infinite emptiness of self. There's the field, but anything you put in front of it creates conditions which consciousness can say, how beautiful you are, or, oh, you've got, food stuck on your face, and comb your hair or whatever. So these are, here's an example of how Rumi can give you a spiritual truth that is very profound and applies to science, and it applies to mind, and it applies pretty much across the board. But in my book called Life Force by Claude Swanson, PhD, a physicist who unfortunately died recently, he's actually practiced biogeometry, was friends with Ibrahim Cream, and actually was in class with Angie, my wife, before he died, which is really sad because I was trying to book a podcast with him and I found out he died. But in his book, Life Force, which if you don't have, Isabel, it'll blow your mind. It's about 800 pages of research on what life force is from around the world. And some of these studies are completely mind-boggling, like showing that Tai Chi masters can magnetize wood and plastic.
Wow.
They can do the craziest things that science says is impossible to do.
Wow.
But in there, he's got an experiment that was done. And what they did was they took two groups of meditators. They had one group just continue their normal meditations on their own, like if you get up in the morning and meditate. Then they had another group choose a partner and do meditation together for the study period, which I think was 4 to 6 weeks, if I remember right. And so the difference was you meditated alone or you meditated with someone, like maybe you and I sitting together in a bedroom or a meditation space and just going into the emptiness together. Through scientific research, what HeartMath showed is that when people meditate together, they correlate. So their rhythms start entraining with each other. They start becoming one being, is what the research shows. So then at the end of the study, they did this wild experiment, which goes hand in hand with what you were talking about earlier, which was why you made me think of it. They then took the meditators. So they took the people that meditated by themselves, they put them in a lab where they hooked them up to electroencephalograms and brainwave monitoring and biorhythms like a galvanic skin response, heart rate, whatever. And they took another one to another lab. And so they had a control and a subject, and they flashed a strobe light in the eyes, and they had these two people connected in labs that could, 40, 50 miles away, but they were connecting them through computers so they could simultaneously watch the data of either of the two people, even though they were 40 or 50 miles away. And no matter what they did, the people that meditated but weren't together didn't have any connection. You flashed a strobe light in one's eyes, the other one's brain waves didn't register it, their biorhythms didn't change. But when they took the people that meditated together and they put them in labs, no matter what the distance was, and they flashed a strobe light in the eyes of one of them, it immediately registered in the other as though they had seen the strobe light. And they showed that these two were so correlated just from meditating together that there wasn't any experience that one could have that the other wasn't experiencing.
Wow.
Which, interesting, is exactly what quantum entanglement experiences show.
That coherence.
Coherent entanglement.
It reminds me of this one study that they did on plants, where I forget if it was in The Secret Life of Plants or The Secret Teachings of Plants. But if you have house plants at your house, which I would imagine you probably have quite a lot, and your entire garden as well, your beautiful garden. If you were to take a trip all the way to the other side of the world, say you go to Europe, and while you're in Europe, you have an orgasm. At your moment of orgasm, your plants will know that that's happening. They'll actually be able to register that on a EKG or whatever they hook them up to. You're so quantumly entangled with every living being. Every body of water comes into coherence with each other in time.
I'm going to share a book with you and the audience that, honestly, Isabel, if you aren't blown away by this book, I will buy it back off of you and I will apologize to you. but I'm not an easy guy to impress with books, but I've got a lot of impressive books, and this is one of them that's got a lot of stuff that'll blow your mind. It's called The Secret Life of Nature, and it's written by Peter Tompkins, who was co-author of The Secret Life of Plants. And it goes into a lot of Rudolf Steiner's teachings, but it one of the key things in this book is it's got an expose of a Canadian psychologist named, I believe, Ron Cohen, who is a Buddhist practitioner of a specific type of Buddhism. But he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he could see all the way down to the subquantum level. He could see all the way down to the electron.
Wow.
And he could describe it and tell pictures. So he was talking about all sorts of wild stuff. But The Secret Life of Nature is a profound book that I think will blow your mind.
Oh, I'm excited.
And anyone that reads it, because it really shows you what's going on out there. The next question that I had is, do you think water has subtle energy fields of its own, such as the etheric field, astral field, or others? And if so, why is it important to understand that? Plants have their own etheric field, animals do. They have astral fields, we do. Even rocks have their own fields. Have you looked at any research on whether or not water has its own energy fields in this regard?
Well, it would seem so. I mean, we talked a bit about how water is connected to the etheric field, and that seems to be the most accessible kind of access point for affecting or accumulating etheric energy. And that's one of its primary roles in nature, right? Is as liquid organite. It absorbs and retains all this orgone energy, all this life force energy. When you speak to different water wisdom carriers in different traditions, they're very clear on the fact that different bodies of water have their own unique spirits. That if you approach one lake, it's going to have a very different energy and a very different response to you, and very different memories and vibrational fields than another lake, for example. And that there are spirits or beings who dwell in these fields of energy that are contained by the lake, the organite field of etheric energy that the lake resonates with. And so I think so. I think each body of water is in connection to all other bodies of water, that water itself as one entire organism is present and conscious as being itself, in the same way that you are present and conscious of being your entire body as a body of water. And yet, each one of your cells, which is also in itself a little body of water, also has its own very unique field, its own very unique vibration, potentially its own very unique consciousness. Even though it is you and you are it and it exists within you, it's 70% water by volume, you're 70% water by volume. It's like a smaller holographic, projection of yourself. It's a part of your field, but it also has its own field. And I feel that it's the same way with water, that water as a whole, all water in the cosmos shares a field. All water on Earth shares a field, and also individually, each body of water has its field.
Yeah, I think kind of like the fractal or the holographic concept, you can take a piece of a holographic image, and no matter how small, it contains the whole. And so I think water would probably have to fit in that way for all the same reasons.
Yeah, it would make sense.
Most anyone listening to my podcast is likely to be aware of the many health benefits of extra virgin olive oil. There are countless research papers on its benefits, and it can be used in smoothies, baking, cooking, as well as a nutritional aid, and even on your skin for improved skin health. Unfortunately, a tiny fraction of the extra virgin olive oil used is made from authentic organic sources and can be toxic for your body due to residual pesticides. Additionally, the polyphenol content in olive oil degenerates over time or degrades. Sadly, most store-bought olive oils can be years old by the time they make it to the store shelf, meaning that there are not many polyphenols or life-giving nutrients left in the product. But Paleo Valley comes to the rescue again. Paleo Valley's new extra virgin olive oil comes from a certified organic valley in rural Greece, where the olives are grown using sustainable farming practices. No pesticides or chemicals are used during the cultivation process. This dedication to organic farming not only preserves the natural integrity of the olives, but also ensures that the final product is free from harmful residues. Discover Paleo Valley's extra virgin olive oil, a powerhouse of health benefits. Pressed just after harvest, it retains the health supportive polyphenols at their peak. This ensures you get the full health advantages only fresh, cold-pressed olive oil can offer. This high-potency olive oil is fresh, pure, and loaded with beneficial nutrients. Packed with antioxidants and polyphenols, Paleo Valley's extra virgin olive oil naturally contains polyunsaturated fats, which contribute to healthy brain and heart function and support the body's natural response to inflammation. Not only is Paleo Valley's extra virgin olive oil a powerful superfood to add to your daily diet, it is packaged in dark glass bottles to maximize freshness and minimize nutrient loss. The dark glass provides protection against the deteriorating effects of light. If you want to support your whole body, including your brain, heart, and skin, and make the best tasting, highly nutritious foods for you and your family, there's no better place to go for super clean, nutrient-rich extra virgin olive oil than Paleo Valley. To get your organic extra virgin olive oil now, go to paleovalley.com/CHEK15. That's PALEO valley.com/CHEK15. No promo code is required. Just use the URL to get 15% off your order. My family and I love Paleo Valley's excellent products and use them every day, and I'm more than confident that you will love them too. Do you feel there's a key relationship between water, our cerebrospinal fluid, and other specialized fluids in the body, and how that relates to how our soul inhabits the body?
Yeah, definitely.
It's quite amazing when you think about the fact, I think, isn't there 7 different types of water? You've got the water in the inner ear, you've got the water in the eyes, you've got blood, you've got
Lymph,
lymph,
cerebrospinal fluid,
cerebrospinal
synovial
fluid,
fluid,
synovial fluid.
tears,
I
tears,
think there's
semen,
7
breast
tiers.
milk,
Yeah,
lymphatic,
urine.
urine. Yeah, so
So
many.
those are all unique expressions of water, without which we would be dead or dumb and blind, which would make life very different. Any comments you have on these specialized fluids in the body about their relationship to water, and also how do you feel that has to do with our soul's ability to be in the body?
Yeah, I mean, there's the fluid waters of the body, which you named, but also all of our tissues, all of our organs, all of our glands, all of these, you know, seemingly solid organs of our body, they're also mostly water, 70% by volume and over 99% molecularly. So we have the fluid systems, but really everything in the body is mostly water. And researchers have started to see that your memories and actually your entire subconscious mind are actually stored in your biowater. So, like if you look at the fascia, for example, which is 80% structured water and 20% protein, it keeps this record of all of your memories, right? It's been said that the body keeps the score, but it's almost more accurate to say the body water keeps the score, that it encodes everything that's happened to you consciously and subconsciously. And even if someone is clinically brain dead with zero electrical activity in the brain, there are cases where even when their brain function is restored, they can recall with perfect clarity every single conversation that happened in the room while they were comatose, because the water they're made of is paying attention. Like we were saying before, water is, it's called the sensitive chaos because it is the most sensitive thing in the universe, 65 octaves of sensitivity, and it doesn't stop paying attention just because we don't have brainwave capacity, right? It's always there. It's observing and it's remembering. And your fascia, which is it's one of its primary roles, if not the primary role, is actually the irrigation network of all of your cells, right? It is what delivers these little droplets of water to every single cell in your body. As you move, as you, compress and release, it's delivering water to all of your cells, and it will actually shift its structure in response to trauma and store that, even if your conscious mind forgets about the event. And the way that it stores that is by drying out in that area, creating knots and clumps where there's no flow of water and irrigation in that area anymore. And those are where those stuck stagnant memories are stored. They're stored in the dry places. So where there's flow in the body, there's energy, but where energy gets stuck, there's this drying effect that happens.
It's
Most
like a
people
fossilization, isn't it?
Yeah, and most people are so we hold on to so many things. We allow stress and triggers and traumas and all of these things to imprint on us so much that people are just gradually becoming more and more dehydrated, even in their tissues, where the baptizing, cleansing flow that allows you to, energetically and also physically release, it's not there anymore. And so then you get this buildup of inflammation. And of course, the inflammation leads to the acidification. And all of these are downstream effects of the dehydration, right? But so that's kind of your subconscious, your memories and that sort of thing. And I would say that even though it's all throughout the body, I think of that as mostly being in the fascia. And then there's the CSF, of course, which you mentioned, which is absolutely amazing. It might actually be the conductor of our super consciousness, right? If the fascia is more of the subconscious, the CSF would be the super consciousness. So there was a doctor by the name of Dr. Randolph Stone who said
Oh,
that,
yes. Studies work a lot.
yeah, he's great. I love him.
Polarity therapy.
Yeah, he said the soul swims in CSF. And there was a spiritual teacher named Nisargadatta who said, where the fluids come together, the sense I am appears, meaning where the two pathways of cerebral spinal fluid meet at the choroid plexus. That's kind of the birthplace of the superconsciousness, because your cerebral spinal fluid is really the pathway, the physical pathway of what's spoken of energetically in the Eastern scriptures as the Ida, the Shushumna, and the Pingala. So the Shushumna is the central channel, and the Ida and the Pingala swirl around them in this double helix. And your cerebral spinal fluid has the exact same pathways. It doesn't just flow in a straight line, it actually spirals. In fact, the German word for spinal column is spiral column, and the German word for vertebrae is vortices. And so this this water is incredibly crystalline. It's some of the most highly structured water in your body, and it's piezoelectric as well, meaning you can activate its flow of energy and its release of light through very specific practices. When you look at a lot of the yogic practices, especially the bandhas, where you do this compression in certain places, that compression of the cerebral spinal fluid piezoelectrically actually stimulates it to release more biophotons. And so it's always emitting light within you all the time, right? So you have these three rivers, right? And these 33 vertebra or vortices that act as portals of energy transference that vortex the cerebral spinal fluid. And then because water is the mediator between physicality and the 0 point energy of the quantum field, it's when water is vortexing is when it's most prone to receive energy from the quantum field. Theodore Schwank showed that when water is moving in general is when it becomes a lot more sensitive to its environment. And Schauberger talked a lot about the fact that the vortex draws in this raw energy from the field. And so when the CSF is moving along the spinal column, it's picking up all of this hormonal information from your 7 endocrine glands, which tells it about your idea and perception of reality. And it's picking up all of the electromagnetic information from the 7 main nerve plexes, or I think the 6 main nerve plexes in the body. And all of these, the glands and the plexus, correspond to the chakras, and they're being patterned by your perception of reality all the time. The quality and the frequency of the energy generated at those nerve centers, and the quality and quantity of the hormones generated by those endocrine glands, all of this information feeds into the cerebrospinal fluid, which makes a journey every 12 hours from your root to your crown and back. It's this 12-hour pulse, right? And so it's kind of patterning our perceptions of the world. There's my favorite CSF researcher, Dr. Mauro Zapatera. I think it's his video actually that I had sent to you. He got his MD and his PhD both from Harvard, and he said, the CSF is constantly transmitting both vibration and light, and the energetic field that it creates in the body can reach every single major center of the brain and the entire central nervous system instantaneously and non synaptically. So, without a thought process. So, it creates these spontaneous states of being that arise not through mental thought processes, but through the wisdom of light that is conducted by water instantaneously all throughout the body. And I think this explains why intuition and meditative states are not thought based, they're not synaptic, and sometimes they're even precognitive, right? Because they arise as this sense of knowing, not as thoughts, but as the antenna of the CSF, the seawater. Like your cerebrospinal fluid is only one molecule different from seawater. It is basically these three rivers of ocean in your spine, and it transmits this energy instantaneously through the nervous system. I think the CSF is absolutely fascinating, especially when you start getting into the rhythms of the sacred secretion and how to really cultivate the chrism oil and how to raise that so that the metabolites are upgraded and transformed. The tryptophan to melatonin to dimethyltryptamine and these vasopressin and oxytocin and these other hormones of enlightenment that basically get released into your system. Dr. Carly Nude also has really incredible insights on how your bio water is the conductor and the vessel of your whole sense of self, and how the shifting of the molecular structure of our bio water over time, over the course of your entire lifetime, also reflects shifting from being more of a pure soul when you first come in and you're 100% structured bio water. If you measure a baby, they're 100% structured bio water. And by the time we get to the point of being a geriatric, once we're elderly, it's about 50% structured water. So as our bio water imprints these different vibrational experiences, we develop more of a personality as well. As we age, our bio water takes on these patterns and these vibrations and these restructurings and destructurings and dehydrations and asymmetries over time, over a lifetime of different experiences. And she explains how the self, the pure self that is pure consciousness, that childlike purity and innocence, is so much more accessible to us when we're younger because we're so much more structured at that point in time. We're a
And
purer,
coherent.
we're so much more coherent, exactly. And it's more like a prism, right? When you shine light, the light of consciousness, through a prism, this purely coherent bio water, what you get back is this beautiful rainbow. Whereas if you shine it through shards of glass that are bulk, unstructured, incoherent, which we develop over a lifetime of hanging on to this, anger or this frustration or this resentment or this heartbreak or this grief or whatever it is. And, we're by the time we're elderly, or even when we're very sick, even when we're very diseased, you can see in the bio water of a diseased person, it's much more destructured, it's much more bulk. And this is the way in which disease actually takes root in the body, through these energetic perturbations of the vibrational fields of the bio water. But you don't have the same access to that level of just bright, energetic innocence that you do when you're a child. Your bio water that conducts your consciousness is quite a bit different from those factors as well. So I think it's really interesting the way our bio water not only determines the way we experience our consciousness, but how much pure consciousness can even be expressed through us. And I think the CSF is really, at least in my experience, is really the key to optimizing that. Because if you focus on the CSF, that bathes the entire central nervous system, that affects every organ, that affects every gland, that affects the fascia. Working with our fascia is incredibly important too. Working with our lymphatic system is incredibly important. But when it comes to really optimizing our consciousness and our states of coherence, it's really those CSF practices that I find to be the most profound.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, a lot of the yogic practices and breathing practices are pressurizing and pumping the CSF, which leads to DMT being produced in the pineal gland and people having, union experiences. Another thing that a lot of people are not aware of, you might be, but I'll share it for people's knowledge. People typically, even people that are trained therapists, aren't aware, but the CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, enters the nerve roots, every single nerve root in your body, and becomes what's called axoplasmic fluid. And Irvin M. Kaur, who is a famous osteopath scientist researcher, was hired in the early 40s to do research. He was hired by the Chiropractic Association, I believe, in the United States, to do research to find out why it is that chiropractic produced all these healing miracles, because they didn't have any scientific way to explain it. But Irvin Kaur basically tracked cerebral spinal fluid flow and showed that it comes out of the spinal canal into the nerve roots. And he did all sorts of neat studies. He showed, for example, that there are 42 different proteins in cerebral spinal fluid, and that if you extracted key ones, there was 16 of them, if I remember right, that if he extracted them from the cerebral spinal fluid, that the person's body would begin to atrophy. And so he showed that cerebral spinal fluid actually is not just what people think it is. It's actually a delivery mechanism for nutritional factors that the body needs and muscles need, because if they extracted those proteins from a given nerve root, like say C5 that feeds the deltoid would begin to atrophy, and they couldn't rehabilitate it without the cerebral spinal fluid having those key proteins in it. So my point in bringing that up, aside from what I just shared, is the fact that all the things that you talked about consciousness, light, it being a liquid crystal, it penetrates all the way into the nerve roots and the fine rootlets. And if you study an anatomy book, there's nerve endings going to almost every single cell in the body. So the way I see it is that the nervous system is really, with the cerebral spinal fluid, it becomes a fiber optic system. And the whole point of fiber optic is that it's light transfer, not just chemical transfer. And everything is communicating in the body at the speed of light. And one of the ways they know this is true is they've done experiments with concert pianists, and they've measured the speed at which their fingers traverse the keyboard. And then they calculate that against the speed of a nerve impulse in the body. And different classes of nerves have different impulse rates. So, for example, C fibers have a different conduction velocity than A fibers. Delta fibers, which communicate pain, have a slow conduction velocity, but things like proprioceptive nerves have a high conduction velocity, so you can respond quicker. But they've shown that it is actually physiologically impossible for the brain waves to get from the brain to the pianist's fingers at the speed they're making transitions in notes, and concluded that there has to be light transfer through the biophoton emissions. And then there's other systems such as wave field coherence, and showing that the brain goes into a state of coherence, and there's ultimately, it's like a musical instrument that's producing waves of frequency that emanate through the body at the speed of light. So point being that the cerebral spinal fluid, in my observation, is actually a fiber optic cable system that allows consciousness to move through the body at the speed of light.
Wow.
So that's an interesting
Beautiful
fact. Another thing too is, I'm sure you know, there are many cases in the medical literature of people with hydrocephalus that have 95% of their brain gone, and they have, some of them, I've read one case where the guy had an IQ of 125 and they had no idea until somebody did a scan on him that he had hydrocephalus, and he had completely good grades in college, good grades in school, was a fully functioning human being. And so this is a big challenge to brain science, and brain as the seat of consciousness and all that, because the guy didn't have anything basically but a brainstem. He only had 5% of a normal brain. The rest of it
But
was
he
all
had tons
water.
of cerebrospinal fluid. Yeah. It's
Yes, he had a head
incredible.
full of cerebrospinal fluid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's astounding. And wasn't there even one guy who was in Mensa? He had an IQ of like 126, even though he was missing the vast majority of his brain matter and just had CSF in there.
Yeah, there's probably at least a dozen of these cases that have been documented. Another thing that's interesting along the lines of what you were sharing about fascia, and people have to remember that the tissue that makes the cell wall is called a membrane. And Francis Marion Pottinger and others have shown that you can take the nucleus of a cell out and the cell can still function, even strip the nervous system out of cats doing research, and showed that the hormonal system would still run the body, but all the only difference was is that all the physiological functions happened slower. It took more time for the communications. So he showed that the nervous system just speeds up what's already happening in the fluids of the body with the hormones.
Wow,
And
interesting.
yeah, and Steiner actually, in one of his books, I don't remember exactly which one because I've read so much of Steiner, it merges together after 25 plus years of reading Steiner. But Steiner talks specifically about the fact that the number of membranes in any organism has a direct correlation to how conscious it is. And he shows, for example, a plant leaf only has a few membranes. So what Steiner showed is that consciousness as a wave penetrates a cell. So if you take a single cell, like if you just take anyone listening, you can just take your fingers and put your index finger and thumb together to make a circle to model a cell. So if you think of consciousness as a wave, it penetrates one side of the cell, hits the other side of the cell, and keeps going, like light going through two window panes. But whenever you have two window panes, some of the light is going to refract back, bounce back to the other pane, and it'll start reverberating just like sound in the body of a guitar or a piano, for example. It resonates. It's a resonant cavity. So Steiner showed that the more membranes there is in a body, the more you get this resonant effect, which creates a greater sense of self. And a
Interesting.
human being has a lot of membranes compared to a plant or a single-celled organism or a mouse, etc. But each animal, like a buffalo, will have a lot more membranes than we will. So would a grizzly bear, and so would a whale, because they're bigger. But the difference is each species has consciousness that's unique to the species. And a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that human beings are the most conscious, intelligent animals in the world. But there's a lot of good research that dolphins and whales may actually have higher levels of consciousness than we do. And I don't doubt it at all, because I don't know about you. I haven't seen dolphins and whales lighting forest fires and starting wars
Yeah.
and destroying their own family and eating junk food, and on goes the list. So I just wanted to share with you that the concept of the membranes, because inside the cell is fluid and it's piezoelectric and it's got all these other unique qualities. So you could actually envision like each of those cells, which there's water molecules, which are again like the jewels in Indra's net, and they're all resonating with each other. So you could see that the water in the body and in the cells is actually like a resonator for consciousness that is flowing through us. And because water has got such a high rate of reception, it can go, I believe, all the way and connect into the non-local domain. It would have to, in order to basically function as the interface with the mind of God and individual minds at every level of the entire universe. And as we both talked about last time, there is water everywhere in the universe, which is quite a mind-boggling recent finding. It's like, I remember reading a research paper where the scientists first figured this out, and it was quite shocking to them, like, oh my God, there's water everywhere out there, because nobody would think that there was water out there. The other thing is I don't know if I mentioned it, but I think it might have been Fred Hoyle, but they showed that 98% of what we think of as stardust in space is actually bacteria. They
Really?
found bacteria everywhere in the universe. So there's life everywhere, water and bacteria. That's the beginning of life. So that basically the whole universe is like a giant living organism, which is, really spiritually what most religions and spiritual philosophies believe, at least those that I've studied.
As above, so below.
Yeah, as
Mhm.
within, so without.
Mhm. Yeah, it's fascinating what you're sharing about the membranes as well. It reminds me so much of Dr. Bruce Lipton's work, and where he showed that it's not the nucleus of the cell that contains all of the information in the brain of the cell and the determining, organism of the cell in the way that we thought, but it's actually the membrane that is the brain. It's the cell wall that is the interface with its world, and therefore determines all of the functions and the vibratory patterns inside of the cell. And it kind of reminds me as well of what we were talking about earlier, that reality is what's currently happening, and reality happens through our perceptions, right? Through our awareness and our sensory capacities, and that's really what determines our entire understanding of the world, our whole paradigm. And that's true not only on a human level, but probably every body of water, certainly on the cellular level as well, that it's the cell walls and the membranes that interact with its environment that determine the entire inner terrain of that cell. Is the intracellular fluid going to be structured or not? How is the DNA getting signaled? Like, how is the RNA getting signaled? All of these things come from the actual membrane of the cell and not from the nucleus.
Yes. Something you said earlier, I wanted to elaborate on a little bit. I was going to mention it before and it just came back to me. There's a book that I think will blow your mind. Have you ever heard of the atomic physicist who was a compatriot of Albert Einstein, named French atomic physicist named Jean Cheron?
No, I don't think so.
Well, he's written, I think, 3 books. 2 of them are more readily available. One might be in French. One of them is called The Unknown Spirit. The second title is escaping me. They both have fairly similar information. I think he just kind of softened it up for the public. But in The Unknown Spirit, Jean Cheron, Einstein was quite a spiritual man, but Cheron, through all of his research on atomic physics, came to the conclusion, and this is important, that electrons are conscious. And so when you think about hydrogen and oxygen, without electrons, you have neither. You can't have hydrogen or oxygen or anything in the periodic table without electrons. So what Cheron showed and did the mathematical equations to back it, and he describes this in his book, The Unknown Spirit, which it's a hard book to find, but if you might be able to find it on Amazon. Sometimes it's like $200. I had Penny search it out and found it, and I found a couple of copies for like $30 each. But he showed that not only are electrons conscious, that they have free will, that they have thoughts, and that they move backwards and forwards in time, and that they have an internal domain inside the electron that's in a hyperspace dimension that is actually, as the electron is going into entropy, the inner aspect is going into negentropy. So paradoxically, the electron is gathering information everywhere it goes, just like a water cell having relationships with other electrons. And the whole thing's being recorded essentially in the non-local field, or the mind of God. And it's a quite powerful, interesting book. And the reason I wanted to share that with you is because I think if you study Cheron's work on electrons and their connection to, he literally says they are the carriers of spirit, and see what he shows, it takes the concept of hydrogen and oxygen to a completely different level, because you realize without the electrons, neither of those two elements could exist. So water may actually be more intimately related to the electrons than actually the hydrogen and the oxygen, because the electrons are the mediator that holds them all together. The whole periodic table is held together by electrons. So that's just something that I think, with your level of understanding of water and the hydrogen oxygen relationship, the periodic table of relationships, that you might find yourself thrown into some very deep meditations, just as I was. And I had, I was doing all sorts of drawings, and I mentioned him, I think, in my water chapter. I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure I did.
I remember you yeah, I remember you mentioning that. Definitely. It's fascinating. It's really I'll have to check out that book for sure. I tend to really, really resonate with Walter Russell's concepts of the periodic table and the elements and how there really are no separate elements, but everything is kind of in this fluid field of becoming one another, and they're just
Yes.
temperature and density gradients of differentials that determine whether, something is going to express as this element or that element, because everything is always exchanging energy all the time. And I really loved the kind of spiral concept of the periodic table where hydrogen is at the center and hydrogen can take 7 octaves of vibratory fields, and then you get all of the other elements that spiral off from that one. And I think there's so much, yeah, there's so many ways of conceptualizing of this beautiful symphony of a universe that we're in, and fascinating about the electrons having their own thought patterns and their own,
Yeah.
yeah,
Free will. He said they
experiences,
have free
their own
will.
free will. Yeah. You know what it actually reminds me of? And this goes back to a question that you asked earlier as well. Dr. Bern Cropland's work, or Professor Bern Cropland's work. He developed a methodology of studying water that, because there have been a lot of different crystallographers over the years, each of whom have their own method of looking at the structure and the functionality of water. And his method was looking at individual water drops, and he was able to show that each drop of water has its own personality in a way, and will interact with other drops of water in different ways depending on what it's been exposed to. So depending on the environment, depending on the minerals, depending on the vibratory fields that it's been exposed to, all of these things will affect the way that it interacts with other water droplets, in the same way that the way we interact, whatever relationship we have, anybody that you meet, the way you talk to them and communicate with them is entirely patterned by, what your body water has experienced in your lifetime. And that's true not only on a human scale, but all the way down to the little droplet scale. And you asked earlier if each body of water has its own field. And I think, yeah, Professor Cropland's work is probably a good example of that, even down to the water droplet level, each droplet has its own field.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. And you could probably take that right to the molecule, especially when you're dealing with atmospheric gases and things where water's evaporating to smaller and smaller units, right? You could get right to the molecule, and water molecules are super, super small. I can't remember what the size of them is, but it's wickedly small. I mean, they penetrate rock and everything else. Hi, everybody. Thank you for learning and growing with me and joining me on my podcast. A quick question for you. Do you know if you're getting enough magnesium? Because 4 out of 5 Americans aren't, and that's pretty much true worldwide. And that's a big problem because magnesium is involved in more than 600 biochemical reactions in your body. Today, I want to talk to you about the most common signs to look for that could indicate that you're magnesium deficient. Listen carefully to the end because there's a special offer happening, and this could be exactly what you need. So here we go on some of the common symptoms that indicate you might be magnesium deficient. Are you irritable or anxious? If you're not sure, ask your partner. Do you struggle with insomnia? Do you experience muscle cramps or twitches? Do you have high blood pressure? Are you constipated? Do you have a hard time falling asleep or getting a restful sleep? Do you feel more stressed than others that seem to be in the same or similar situations? Do you feel moody and wish your emotions were more stable? Do you feel you lack mental alertness? Do you feel you're at risk for osteoporosis and desire to build stronger bones? There are dozens of symptoms of magnesium deficiency, so these are just a few of the most common ones. Now, here's what most people don't know. Taking just any magnesium supplement won't solve your problem because most supplements use the cheapest kinds that your body simply can't absorb. That's why I personally recommend Magnesium Breakthrough. It's the only full-spectrum magnesium supplement with 7 unique forms of magnesium that your body can actually use and absorb. All Bioptimizer supplements are the best of the options available, or I wouldn't be offering them to you. I don't offer anything on my podcast that my family and I don't use ourselves. Bioptimizers is so committed to offering you the best quality products that really work that if you are not satisfied, you can get a full refund, no questions asked. In fact, they are so confident they offer a 365-day money-back guarantee. To get your Magnesium Breakthrough and your 10% Living 4D discount, go to bioptimizers.com/living number 4D. That's bioptimizers.com/living number 4D. Use the promo code Paul10 to get your discount. And by the way, in addition to the discount you get by using the promo code Paul10, you can get gifts with your purchase, up to 2 travel-sized bottles of Magnesium Breakthrough. Act fast. This is a limited time offer, so go to bioptimizers.com/living4D and use the promo code Paul10 for your 10% discount. Enjoy. Next was, do you feel the waters within our body are altered by our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and spiritual practice? And if so, how? Now, we've talked a fair bit about that, but I wanted to just give you a chance to elaborate on that, because I think this is a place, based on what you and I know and others like us that study water, it would really bring us back to this importance of presencing, being aware, tantric practices, mindfulness practices, because of the reality of what you're probably about to share.
Yeah, I think we're both on the same page with this one for sure. I think it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear that it absolutely affects it. And I think this is really going back to Dr. Bruce Lipton's work again. I think this is the basis of the biology of belief. I think, how our state of mind and our emotions determine our biochemistry and our cellular function. It starts first and foremost with the biowater resonating to our dominant vibration. Our
Yes.
water is an antenna that's receiving information, and the fractalism of structured water, like an antenna, sends and receives energy, vibration, and frequency in the same way that the fractal antennas in our cell phones work, right? They transfer these huge amounts of information and energy in a tiny amount of space. And that's, as we've, been discussing at length, that's exactly what our water does. So if your drinking water and your biowater can act as an antenna that can be tuned to send and receive specific bandwidths of scalar energy, it's really up to us to decide what frequency we want to tune ours to, what channel, so to speak, we're going to set them on. It's believed that in religious traditions like Tibetan Buddhism, they chant sometimes the same mantras for decades to very, very precisely tune the structure of their biowater to a very specific channel of light and consciousness and information. And I think it really does take that long to create that level of solidity and stability and coherence in the molecular structure, that it will stay attuned to that particular channel of consciousness that particular mantra opens up. Every mantra will open up a different channel of consciousness, right? But it would take that much concentration and repetition, because water is, as you said, so dynamically responsive. It's always shifting all the time. Every second it can change a trillion times in response to its environment. That statistic, I have to stop myself there, because that was made up. That that was an example. That's not an actual statistic. And usually when I say numbers, it's from research, but that number I just made up off the top of my head as an example. But however responsive per second it is, just had to add the caveat there. Every other number I think I've said on this podcast has been on purpose, but that one anyway. But it's so dynamically responsive, right? And so the more, if its structure can be held more stable, right? Especially if the structuring influence that it receives is unceasing, like the way that these monks meditate ceaselessly on the same pattern of sound vibration. And, when you're in those traditions, it's encouraged that you, even in your mind, even that your unconscious dialogue in your mind as much as you can. You should replace it with your mantra over and over and over again, so that if your mind starts to wander, it will be trained to wander to the mantra instead of
Yeah.
wandering to, whatever your stresses of the day may be. And so there, by doing that, your body water literally starts to hum at that frequency and to unlock that specific dimension of consciousness to your lived experience. But of course, most of society does exactly the opposite. Rather than broadcast a frequency of our own, or rather than choose a specific frequency to tune our antenna to, we just passively receive all of the chaotic signals from the environment that actively destructure our biowater. Every errant thought and emotion, every TV show we watch, every EMF field from a Wi-Fi router that we're exposed to, they all affect our biowater's structure and therefore our consciousness and longevity. Our body water is like a tuning fork, right? So it's going to resonate to the dominant vibration in the field. For most people, the dominant vibration in the field is their electronics and their Wi-Fi routers and the dirty
Yeah.
electricity and the EM and the 5G in cities. And it's like, talk about, creating an alternate reality through this
Hmm.
transhumanism that you were talking about
Yes.
before. Talk about completely deviating from the natural pattern and structure and experience. Our literal biowater is being actively reprogrammed by these dominant fields. So that
Yeah.
means our consciousness is in effect being reprogrammed by these dominant fields, because that's how our consciousness comes through, is through the structure of our biowater. So your gap junctions can start to resonate at a different frequency. Your cells literally cannot absorb hydration in the presence of strong man-made non-native EMFs, because that's the osmotic flow of water in and out of cells is completely a hydroelectric process. It's the electricity that's the cellular voltage at the cell membrane, these magical little cell membranes that keep coming up, that determine how much water that cell can drink in and how much used water the cell can expel out. So even that is programmed by, the EMFs in the field. So as a tuning fork, we need to recognize that we have to be incredibly protective and really steward the sanctity and the sacred responsibility of the vibrational frequency of our biowater, because it matters, because water structures our reality both personally and collectively. As the holographic matrix of existence, we get to take personal sovereignty and responsibility and step into that stewardship over our own vibrational field. I think cultivating this loving, nurturing relationship with water gives us so much more of an impetus to do so, because we recognize that the water that comes through us, we get to take care of that. And then it goes right back into the watershed again. It comes from our watershed and goes back into our watershed. At least that's how, God designed it to be. Nowadays, we drink water from a completely different watershed, water that's been diverted in from miles away, or from Fiji, or, Evian, France, or the Alps, or whatever. And then, we pee it out and it goes to a filtration plant. So, but
And then it gets drank
ideally,
again.
exactly, people drinking each other's filtered blood plasma and urine. And anyway, really, it's this cyclical process, and we can take it as part of our duty as bodies of water to ensure that any water that comes into us and goes back out into the watershed again leaves us better than it found us. And then, in fact, any water, whether that comes into our house, into our stewardship, into our presence, will leave us better than it found us. And I think that's one of the best, and this is getting a little bit on a rabbit trail here, but one of the best water practices, spiritual practices that we can take on if people listening to this do decide that they want to step onto a water path and feel into, what does water spirituality look like? What does it mean to be a water carrier, a water guardian, a water keeper? And a big part of it is making sure that all water that comes into your care leaves you better than you found it, whether that's because you hum into it, or you love it, or you sing to it, or you have all of these, fancy bougie water alchemy tools that do all kinds of magical things to the water. But in whatever way it comes through you, that you recognize that you have a massive influence on that water. And by influencing water, you influence everything that water is going to come into contact with physically after it leaves your care. But also, as we've been talking about, when you influence one body of water, you influence all bodies of water. And there's water all throughout the universe, that what you do with every single drop of water ripples out through the non physical waters of the etheric field, the field of consciousness, and touches everything else in existence. I feel like the best way to influence our bio water directly is to really cultivate more coherence between all of the vibratory systems of our body, right? If the idea of loving water back to life, enlivening water, restructuring water is the structure, is the coherence, is the symmetry. It's the vibrational field that creates the coherence in water. So to create more coherence in our bio water, cultivate practices that will create more symmetry and coherence between the left and right hemispheres of your brain. There's breathwork practices that you can do that do that. There's meditative practices that you can do to do that. And actually, even just drinking certain kinds of water, like drinking full spectrum coherent water. Analemma did studies that showed that just drinking that would create brainwave synchronization in about 98% of the participants in their study. You can create coherence in your heart waves as well, as taught by heart math that you were talking about earlier, and by Dr. Dan Winter, and in this way you can actually embed the hydrogens of your biowater into this larger fractal array of consciousness. It shifts the geometry of your biowater to embed it into this harmonic geometric field. You can actually you hear what I'm saying, but basically just rather than letting your biowater be affected by every movie you watch, every piece of news you read, every Wi-Fi signal, you start to program the kind of life that you want, the kind of field that you wanna have, the dominant physiological and psychological standing wave pattern that you want to be your dominant paradigm.
You mother your water, you nurture it, you accept the spiritual responsibility that you're conscious of the fact that you're made of living water. And though it's there to serve you, you can be there to serve it. Because every breath you breathe out, you're sharing water molecules with people all over the world. In his book, The Unknown Spirit, Charon gives the scientific calculations of how many atoms we have of dinosaurs' bodies, of Buddha's body, Jesus's body, shows beyond a shadow of a doubt we're all not only affecting each other, but we are actually incorporating each other into each other. There is no real division. We're all actually part of each other. So when the world's in the state that it's in and you take responsibility for your I-ness, you automatically transfer your spiritual state, your consciousness, your love into your we-ness, which then is transferred into the all. And that ripples throughout, the cosmos. And I think if each of us just took responsibility for the fact, the best thing you can do to help the world is to heal yourself, love yourself, and become an example for other people. Because when they see someone that's happy and vibrant and healthy and capable of healing and dealing with the challenges of life without, degenerating into a ball of SSRI drugs, then they realize what's possible. There was a couple of things I wanted to share. You know who Diva Pramal and her husband Meetin are, don't you?
Yeah.
They've got a great course you can get right on Amazon on chanting, and it actually teaches you a structure and gives you information about how it works. So anybody that wants to start working with their waters through chanting, toning, particularly chanting, would probably really find that course quite beautiful, and it's easy to get on Amazon. One of the things, I might have mentioned this in our last podcast, but I saw research where they did samples of the cerebral spinal fluid of Tibetan monks, looked at the levels of impurities and the chemical analysis of it, and then they took samples after they had done chanting for a certain number of hours, and they showed that the chanting that they were doing and the toning actually purified the CSF, and that something was happening when they go into these states of sound resonance that actually purified the CSF. And, our question was related to, do you think consciousness affects water? And I believe it was in Masaru Emoto's first book. He showed the Fujiwara Dam, which was known to be highly polluted, and he took a drop of water and showed you the water crystal, it just looked nasty. It just looked terrible and ugly and polluted. And he brought a spiritual master who he gives the guy's name in the book. And the guy did a special prayer standing at the edge of the reservoir. And after the prayer was over, he took a sample of the water and it was mind-blowingly different. It was just so structured and so beautiful. So this guy, one man, did a prayer that affected an entire huge reservoir of water with probably billions of gallons of water in it. And, because of the interconnectivity of water. So it really does show you that one of us can make a difference. I mean, each one of us can literally be a healing force, not only in our own lives, but in the lives of everybody we come into contact with, and even the world, due to non-local resonance, just like those two meditators I talked about being separated at a distance. And I think that's why opening our heart and expanding ourselves by projecting unconditional love into the world as a gift of healing for all and a gift of love for all is very powerful. Because if you're doing distance healing toward one person, then you're targeting your consciousness. Just like if I dial your cell phone number, I'm only going to get you. But if I sent my love to everybody, then it's like a parallel phone ring. Everybody's phone's ringing at the same time. And I think that's where we're at, really. I think a lot of the state of the world is showing us that we've really got to get past our individual differences and our petty needs and say, how can we use the knowledge and the wisdom of the ancients and modern science to each participate in the healing of the entire planet, not just humanity, but the entire planet. And the science of water shows that that's really possible, and that every one of us can make a difference, either for the better or continue to create stress in the system. And that's why I pray for my food. That's why I sing to water. That's why I pray to my water when I get in my cold plunge. And you find quite quickly that it's all alive. It talks right back to you. All the water, the food, all of it talks to me. Stones, plants, animals. God's a lot more magical and mysterious than most people would ever understand from reading scriptures, because, again, you're reading other people's ideas. Rumi said no man can get to God until he becomes a heretic. What does that mean? It means go against the teachings that are written down and have your own experience. You've got it. Joseph Campbell said you cannot take the hero's journey by following somebody else's path. You've got to go off in the woods and make your own trail. And I say that because a lot of people are afraid. They hear people like me and you talking and they think, oh God, if people saw me praying to my food or singing to my water, they would think I'm a weirdo. And well, today's a great day to be a weirdo.
Yeah.
Right? Misery loves company. So let's not fall down to the lowest common denominator. Let's pick up the vibe.
Sanity in an insane world looks insane.
It does. And that's,
You want to be a weirdo.
yeah. And the meaning of the word weird, Fred Allen Wolf talks all about this in one of his books. But he talks about the meaning of the word weird really means mysterious, powerful. Shamans were considered weird. Magical. It's people with magical powers like witches or healers were considered weird. But weird wasn't a negative word back then. If you were considered weird, it was like you were considered like a priest or a healer or somebody powerful. And I think today we've all got to, really tap into our weirdness and celebrate it, because human beings are operating at such a fraction of their potential. My God. I mean, when you look at the research on the human mind and you see what people do in healing ceremonies and what advanced yogis can do and breatharians and sun dancers, like I study these people to remind myself every day, don't be average. Jung said the average man can never be successful. Why? Because by definition, average is average. And none of us are average. We're here because we're all unique expressions of the divine. And I think finding our unique gifts and talents and ways of loving, but with the intention of making the world a better place for all living beings, is the grand opportunity and the grand gift of right now for all of us. I just think these are so important things, and we can't sit around waiting for somebody else to do it.
Absolutely. And I really love, what you're saying about really taking every moment to look around and say, what is the truth of this moment? How can I be the most myself that I can be? How can I be be weird in whatever way is going to create more love, more connection, more beauty, more harmony, more blessing in this moment? And in the Course in Miracles, it says, "You're in the room to heal the room." There's no other reason. You're in the space to uplift the space. That's what you're there for, right? And this is so true in every moment. And, really taking that on as a practice, it's like, I think as well about how, when you are praying with your drinking water in that way, when you're praying with your bath water and your shower water and your cold plunge water in that way, water is the direct reflector of our overall state of consciousness, right? Like collectively speaking. The reason why, it was so effective when that I forget if you said he was a monk or he was just a spiritual master who prayed with the Fujiwara Dam, and he was
Yeah,
able
he
to.
mentioned that he was some kind of a spiritual master. He tells who he was in there, and kind of what his name and stuff was, but he's really just an evolved one of us.
Yeah. So water is always reflecting the dominant consciousness of the area that it's in, right? And then the waters of the earth are reflecting the dominant consciousness of the whole new sphere of the collective human psyche in general. So if you go to a place like, the Hunza region where they have some of the most pristine water in the world. They're also some of the most, enlightened and
Evolved.
long-lived people and evolved people in the world, and you could say, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Are they more evolved because they're drinking the highest quality water, or is their water so high quality because they're really keeping that field of consciousness, the etheric field in that region, perfectly clear, energetically clear, and their water is always in tune with that etheric field that they're cultivating, because I think it's important not only how our energy affects water, but also how water affects our energy. And again, all the waters on the earth carry the collective consciousness. They're the conduit of the human sphere of subconscious energy. So all the rivers, the streams, the oceans, the aquifers, they are the reflection of the collective mind, just as our own personal bio water, like we were talking about before, carries our personal conscious and unconscious minds. The same is true collectively as well. So if water magic just boils down to understanding that, what you do to water physically and energetically becomes your own physical and energetic destiny. What you do to water, you do to yourself. The way you treat water will become your own experience, right? Then, in light of that, consider how our waterways are being poisoned. By direct effect, our consciousness is being targeted and attacked. Water is being used as this silent weapon for a quiet war. It's being used to carry sewage and refuse and toxic sludge and radiation and chemicals and pesticides and herbicides and suicides and every single vile thing you could think of. We would never treat any other living being in the way that we treat the body of life itself. Water is life. And yet it would be inhumane to treat a living being the way that we treat water, right? We dump all of this in water. And that is black magic. And I really think that it's the grossest, most toxic form of black magic, because not only does it poison everything in the ecology physically, but it poisons the field of consciousness as well. I mean, what's happening to our collective consciousness, to the human psyche? There's a degradation in morality, there's a degradation in integrity, compromised human
Sexuality,
potential, sexuality, like you're saying. Yeah,
sex identity.
Dr. James DeMayo did some really interesting research on how the sexual energy corresponds directly to water as well. His work is really interesting in that way. In intelligence as well, there's definitely a lowering of intelligence and just human potential in general. The whole collective seems to be plagued with fear and anxiety and delusion and mania and every other expression of depravity and selfishness and consumerism. And it's really no wonder if our physical, personal bio waters and our consciousness, our personal psyche and awareness are always direct mirrors and reflections of each other in the same way that water is always directly mirroring the etheric field because like we talked about before, they're two sides of the same coin. The same is true collectively. If we are pouring sewage and poisons into our collective waterways, then humanity's consciousness as a whole is suffering massively. There's no peace or calm or clarity in people's minds. And how can there be if the waters that carry our life force energy are so disturbed? Schauberger predicted this well over 100 years ago. He said, based on the way that he saw water being treated, he predicted not only the climatological things that we're seeing now, but he also said that humanity would become less intelligent and less emotionally mature over time. And lock, stock, and barrel, he nailed it on the nose. And I really feel like the elites of this world are very aware of the occult power of water, right?
Oh, yeah. That's why they use it against us.
Exactly. And that's why we're so conditioned and trained from such a young age to see water as being as common as dust and as basic and as uninteresting as like dirt. Like, I mean, not that dirt is uninteresting, but that it's just everyone takes it for granted, right? No one thinks
Generic.
twice about water. It's generic, it's basic. We assume that we already know everything about water and that it's no longer a mystery and that
It's
it's the
wet.
most
Big
simple
deal.
thing. Yeah, who cares? Like, so when I tell people that I teach about water for a living, you should see the looks on people's faces like, water? Like in the toilet? Like, why? But but it's because if we were to step into the power of water, then, free energy, access to divine states of consciousness, profound healing and curative effects and benefits would be as ubiquitous as water itself is. And the elites cannot have decentralized access to the incredible power that clean, living water allows, right? And so they're muddying the waters. Literally, they're using the power of water as a force of evil, as a conduit of literal demonic energies on earth and in our minds. I don't know if you saw this. There's this brand called, what is it called? Death water,
No.
dead water. It's called, yeah, I think it's called Death water. Oh, no, that's not what it's called. Anyways, it's this brand of water that's come out, and it's all over the place now. They've got massive funding. You can find it in any 7-Eleven or grocery store or whatever. And they released a video showing that they actually have a black magician, this sorceress woman, at the facility where they produce this water, speaking incantations over the cans as the water is being bottled into these cans. And it and she's literally invoking spirits into the can and saying, when this can is open, these spirits will be released. This is part of their marketing platform. It's part of their whole business strategy and plan, and they're not hiding it. It's out in the open. They're perfectly open about what it is that they're doing. And their logo, when you look at it side by side with Emoto's image of what the crystallography or lack thereof of water that's been exposed to "You make me sick, I hate you."
Oh my God.
They've
So it's
created their
negative.
logo based on that.
Oh my God. Well, misery loves company. And when the consciousness starts to in mass reaches a low level, that becomes normal, right? And so people start bonding with people that are just as traumatized and just as lost. And it's kind of like a community of cancer cells that just grows and grows and grows until it consumes you. And that's why one of my spiritual practices is to ask yourself, whenever you're facing any opportunity, what would love do now? And I think that's really what we've got to do. And we need to work together. And, I have tremendous empathy for those people because they don't realize they're being brainwashed at every level, from elementary school and kindergarten to religion to the media to social media to the use of scalar generated information fields. I mean, the technology being used against human beings is the most advanced technology in the world, and hardly anybody knows about it. And when I tell people, even with advanced degrees, about this technology, they tell me I'm crazy. And I say, walk right over here in my library. And I start piling books on the table. Then they still don't even want to know about it because it scares them. So they just turn a blind eye to it. But this is no time in the world to be a passive person and not learn and not grow.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody that can listen to what we're saying and just go practice it. Start talking to your water. Empty yourself and listen inside the way you listen to your own thoughts. Put your hands in some water. Get in the bathtub. Empty your mind to say, "Dear water, do you hear me?" And let your mind go flat, and you will hear a response. You will feel the response. Say, "Dear water, if you can feel my presence, send energy into my body so I can feel you." Food will do that to you. Water will do that for you. I mean, stones do that for you. I feel so sad to see the spiritual numbing and deadening of humanity. I've watched it get worse and worse. I'm 62 years old, and in the years that I've been conscious of what spirituality is, which is since I was a child, I've really been shocked at what's going on the planet and how so few people are actually responding to it in meaningful, positive ways. It's like a bunch of people are sitting on the beach and they all see a tidal wave coming, but they're all just sitting there reading their books thinking it's going to go away. It's like,
Yeah, that's why I feel like activism is such a key, because you can look at everything that's going on in the world and you can just get depressed about it, or you can choose to ignore it because it's so much easier to just retreat and, stick your head in the sand. But the only thing that relieves the feeling of anxiety or suffering that or grief that comes when you look at the state of the world is to be actively engaged in shifting it. Not to think that you have to carry the whole weight of it and you have to make a huge impact, but you can do what you can do. It's only up to us to bring the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. It's not up to us to feed the 5,000. You do the little bit that you can do, and just that alone relieves all of the anxiety that comes from the state of the world. So if we want a healthy, peaceful planet, activism isn't just physical engagement, it's a spiritual engagement, right? And there's so many different forms of it. You can do it grassroots, you can do it with your family, you can do it with your community, you can do it in a million different ways. It doesn't have to be holding picket signs, There are
it
so
doesn't
many
have to
ways
be
to.
invasive.
No, no, every person has their own gifts to give, but you have to give them or you're going to get into the state of neg entropy. You're gonna just start wasting away into that head in the sand kind of thing. I feel like one of the best uses that we can make of all of these water magic practices that we've been talking about is as a form of activism, like you were saying, to pray and to intend healing of bodies of water, and knowing that the water in your glass affects the water of a polluted lake across the world if that's your intention. You know, there's so many ways for people to get involved that ripple out.
I think all of us need to realize that all challenges are opportunities, right? If you've got back pain, it's an opportunity to learn to love and care for yourself better and learn things that can help other people. If you've got an illness, doing some research, figuring it out, realizing you got gluten intolerance. Once you know the symptoms of it, you look around, you see it everywhere. You go, "Oh my God, I got to help these people. I'm going to write a book about it." Just like you've done. Look, you're sharing your knowledge on water with countless thousands and thousands, if not millions of people through podcasts. And you're one beautiful little human being who just loves water and loves herself and loves her friends and nature. But look at you are right now broadcasting probably to 50,000 people who can all wake up and any one of these things that we're talking about. So, if we just keep working together, and how much more exciting is life when you have love for life and
Oh
you
yeah.
love the fact that you're like, just realize how powerful each one of us is. If one man can change the level of toxicity in a reservoir the size of a lake that you can water ski on, and billions of gallons of water, Well, he probably could have done the same thing to an ocean because all those water molecules connect instantly. So the size of the water molecule does not differentiate the effect of the consciousness on it because they're all connected. We've all got such a great opportunity, and what a joy it will be if we just pull together and rehabilitate the garden and rehabilitate our education systems and stop funding pirates and criminals and take back our tax dollars so that we do something intelligent with them. And when you look at how foundational water is to consciousness, to life, to health, to food, to nature, to ecosystems, to the atmosphere, I mean, wow. If you want to find a common denominator where an act of consciousness literally affects everything, start there. I mean, start right there. And then little things like doing Tai Chi, doing Qigong, yoga, going for a walk, exercising. Anytime you're running water through your own body, you're actually structuring and harmonizing it because you are a miniature of the system of nature. You've got rivers in you, you've got streams in you, you've got pulse waves in you, you've got sound waves in you. I mean, we can literally take the water that's coming into us, revitalize it, and share it with the world. If you're a healthy person, you got healthy pee. The plants love it. You got healthy poop. The soil loves it. So even what we call waste from a spiritual perspective of a healthy person is a gift to the ecosystem instead of a poison. I want to just say thank you. I think you're so amazing and so beautiful and such a great example for people your age. I mean, if I could make a statue out of you and put it all around the world for 30 something year old men and women to see about how intelligent a person can be at your age and how capable, I would do it. I mean, I hope my daughter can grow up to be as powerful and as conscious and clear headed as you. I mean, that's my objective for my kids.
Thank you, that means the world to me. That is so precious. That reflection really touches me deeply, and I'm
Well,
so
I'm
grateful
dead
for you
honest.
as well, and so grateful for the work that you're doing and all of the millions of lives that you're touching and just the ripples of miracles that you've created. I've met so many people who have had amazing experiences with your work, and you can just see the light in their eyes when they talk about it, like, "Oh, yeah, I've heard his podcast," or "Oh, yeah, I went to the Chek Institute," or whatever it is, or "Oh, yeah, I've read this or that," and it really lights people up, and I think that there's no greater, yeah, determinant of the effect that you're having than the light that you bring to people, and it stays with them even years after. I've seen it firsthand, so thank you for all that
Well,
you
my water's structured.
Yeah, that's the key right there.
I drink good water and I talk to it.
That's all you gotta do.
As we close, tell everybody where to find your information, your website, where they can find your courses, and whatever else you'd like to direct people to.
Since this episode, we've been talking mostly all about the spirituality of water and all of these profound spiritual and scientific aspects of water. I have a course that is called The Spirit of Water, and it's 18 hours worth of teaching just on this topic specifically. So we
Great.
go in deep, all of the quantum science, all of the scriptural teachings, all of the indigenous teachings, all of the water divination practices, hydromancy, all of that, water rituals, you name it. It's probably my favorite course that I teach. And I know you have a link to that. So I'm sure people can find it in the show
Yes, look
notes.
in the show notes. Yes.
Okay, cool. So that is, yeah, if you're interested in the spiritual side of water and you really want to get on the water path in that way, then that would be my number one recommendation. But all of my courses in general, you can find at waterislife.academy. I have a shop with all kinds of water alchemy tools, filters, structurers, electrolytes, water altar things, you name it. And that's at waterislife.shop. I'm pretty active on Instagram, and that's my name at Jen Isabel Friend. I also have a bunch of stuff on YouTube. So I'm pretty much a little bit of everywhere. Just look me up and find me and come say hello.
Don't you know she's the water, baby? She's everywhere.
I like to flow through all the channels.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much, Isabel. What a phenomenal, you know, dialogue and sharing. I love hanging out with people like you because I get to pick up new concepts and ideas and resources. And so it's always exciting because I'm a student for life. And I
Me
love
too. This
sharing it
is
with
so
the
fun.
listeners. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love think of how much of an education the listeners got in 3 hours. I mean, you and I
but it
probably
took
took
us years.
years to be able to have this conversation. And so, guys and girls listening, ladies and gentlemen, if you pay attention to what we just said, you just got the accumulated wisdom of hundreds of courses, hundreds and hundreds of books, and countless
Mhm.
hours of spiritual practices and meditations. And may you be infused with the life, the love, and the consciousness that we are offering you now,
May you put
because
it to use and put it into action and share it with your friends. Let it ripple out.
remember, love is a verb, not a noun. And so let's verb it, baby.
Let's
Uh,
verb it.
yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thank
to
you
my
so much, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you to my sponsors for your amazing products. Thanks to all of you for anything you buy from the sponsors that supports me and the podcast. And you should probably know by now I don't support anything or share anything on my podcast that I don't use and that doesn't meet my values, which are not easy to do. It's very hard for me to find sponsors for this podcast because I have very rigid standards. I won't give you guys anything I won't give my kids. That's my rule. So if you want the best food and the best products and supplements, they are the sponsors of this podcast. That's the best I can find. And so I'm very grateful to the sponsors of the podcast because without them, I couldn't do the podcast. And I also want to say thank you to all of you. We're in this together. Hey, every challenge is an opportunity. Let's dance, baby. Let's get it on. Let's clean this thing up. And you know what? You can do it having fun, right? It's not like someone's torturing you. Do what you love to do it well, and you make other people happy and they get inspired. And that's how we do it. If you love to sing, sing. If you love to write the truth. If you love to dance, dance some truth. If you love to act it out. If you love to get wet, say thank you to the water and carry it around with you and smile and give it away. So lots of love. See you next time with something amazing. Isabel, big kiss. Mwah! You're the best.
Bye. You're the best, Paul. Bye,
Bye, you
everybody.
guys.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Isabel Friend. Follow Isabel on Instagram at JenIsabelFriend or check out her website waterislife.shop for all things water related, including tools for evaluating, filtering, structuring, balancing, and energizing water. Paul's listeners get 10% off any of Isabel's water courses at bit.ly/Isabel's water courses. Just use the code LIVING4D at checkout to save your 10%. That's bit.ly/Isabel's water courses and the code is LIVING4D. Catch up with Paul on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at paul.chek, on X at paulchek, or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/living4d with Paul Chek. Watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com or visit the Chek Institute site at chekinstitute.com to find Paul's e-learning courses, advanced training programs, and to learn more about the Chek Academy. You can read the show notes and find links to the resources mentioned in this episode at chekinstitute.com/podcast. This podcast is not possible without the support of our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Organifi, and Paleo Valley. Please show your appreciation by taking advantage of their special discounts for listeners. The links are in the show notes. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcasts, and YouTube.